like with our technology,
not
we
all
have
right.
Danny in the 21st century plan.
But it says on air. We are on air.
Oh,
Yeah.
Just the okay.
opposite. That's going to throw some people.
$85,000 spent in the right direction.
Ready? All right, let's go.
It is, but then if you look at the other.
I'd like to call this meeting to order, a regular meeting of the Village Board on Monday, June 7th at 7 p.m. in the Germantown Village Hall Boardroom, and also can be accessed via WebEx. This meeting has been given public notice in accordance with sections 19.83 and 19.84 of the Wisconsin statutes in such form that will apprise the general public and news media of subject matter that is intended for consideration and action. Roll call shows all village board members present. At this time, I'll ask us all to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, which stands liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Next item is President's report. They don't have too much to report tonight besides the fact that there is a new seating arrangement, which is obvious, a little bit different than what most people have noticed or seen in the past. We also have our new audio visual equipment up and running, new more high definition cameras, which is either going to help some of us or hurt some of us, depending on how close they get, and better audio all around. So not only for the people that are watching at home, but also the people that are joining us, whether they're watching the streaming or via WebEx. So altogether better and more of a service to the public that wants to come in, see these meetings, or not only participate live in the audience, but may want to call in or view it on the television stations. It's been around, or it's been a while since we've been pretty consistent with our broadcast. It's been off and on based on the age of our equipment and some of the struggles that we had with it, but that's now been remedied, and we're looking forward to better communications and better availability of people that want to join us in different ways to be able to do that and also be able to hear us and not only see us better, but to hear us better as well. So I welcome the change, and hopefully it'll be everything that we want it to be going forward. Next item on the agenda is announcements of forthcoming events of public interest, committee and department reports. We'll start with committee reports and committee chairs, and we'll start first with Trustee Rick Miller.
The general government and finance will meet on Monday, June 21st in this boardroom, 6 p.m. I also had one other thing. A little while ago, we approved some stuff for Sticks Golf in order to have a fundraiser for Stars and Stripes Honor Flight. And that consisted of, you could do a foursome, and part of the money for that foursome at their place would go to that. They also had a party yesterday in the parking lot and inside. And it was very successful. It's $13,000 for the Stars and Stripes Honor Flight.
Great.
So I congratulate Daniel and Ryan Hughes for doing a nice job with this.
Congratulations, nice job. Next committee report will be Trustee Myers.
The next public safety meeting will be July 13th in this building at 6 p.m.
Thank you. And Trustee Kaminsky.
Public Works will meet in this room at 6 p.m. on Wednesday, July 7th.
Thank you. Does anyone else have anything else for announcements of forthcoming events of public interest, committee or department reports? Trustee Ball.
John, the Construction Oversight Committee will be meeting Wednesday, the 9th at 6 o'clock in this boardroom.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Or anything else of announcements of forthcoming events of public interest, committee or department reports? All right, then we can go on to the next item, which is public items not subject to a public hearing. There are no public hearings on tonight's agenda. Before we ask for any participants that are in the audience or joining us via WebEx, I do have two emails that I would like to read into the record. And the first one is from Steve and Jody Rupnow, and it says, "To whom it may concern, we are writing to express our concerns over the request filed by Jason Belkey to rezone his property. We live and own a property down the road from this parcel of land and are concerned with the rezoning request being discussed at tonight's meeting. Our main concerns are the possibility of this change causing additional construction traffic and noise near our home, as well as the rezoning approval opening the front door for other parcels in the area to change the area from the agricultural residential area in which we chose to build our home. Please consider denying this request for the sake of those of us living near and already a busy property. Thank you, Steve and Jody Rupnow." Second email I received was from Rhonda Hilgendorf, and it says, "Village of Germantown, I am sending this email to the Germantown Village Board on behalf of Janice Bernardi. My mother, who lives at North 120 West 13950 Freistadt Road in Germantown. This is her public input regarding the zoning code text amendment proposed by Jason Belkey. She has lived at her current address for over 58 years. She lives a quarter-mile west of the Belkey property. This peaceful rural residential area is being disrupted by the commercial business occurring at the Belkey property, which does not fit in this area. She is bothered by the activity, the amount of vehicles, and the repeated in and out of traffic at his property throughout the day. This activity has greatly increased over the past few years as his business has grown. Janice is strongly against the zoning code text amendment as proposed by Jason Belkey. She fears additional construction services could be allowed to develop in this residential area. Therefore, Janice Bernardi is asking you not to approve the zoning code text amendment. Sincerely, Rhonda Hildendorf and Janice Bernardi." And those are the two emails that I received in regards to one of the items that are on tonight's agenda. Is there anyone else that is in our audience that would like to participate in citizen input or public appearance at this time? All I would ask is that you come to the front podium and state your name and your address for the record. Is there anyone wishing to come forward? Sir.
There you go. Who was on?
My name is Bruce Bernardi. I live at North 120, West 13645 Freistadt Road, Germantown. I live directly next door to Mr. Belkey. I'm a lifelong resident. My wife and I purchased this property, this 40-acre property, to build our home and live on the property. We have been there for 27 years. At the 4/12/21 Plan Commission meeting, 9 people, including myself, spoke out against Mr. Belkey's proposal. They're all concerned as to how this business has grown, running well over its capacity from this site. Large amount of employees, the noise, the amount of debris that hauled into the traffic in and out of the property, storage of materials, running of equipment, deliveries, working off hours, weekends and holidays, loading of salt in the wintertime. On this property, Mr. Belkey has several types of trucks, trailers, equipment, even a yellow party school bus. By my last count of this, all of this equipment, there's 30 units on the property. 90% of them are parked outside. You look out our front door, bedroom windows, our garage door, and all we see are the storage bins and all of this equipment. This property is zoned RS2, which allows for a small business, 1 or 2 employees, plus the owner of the property who must live at the address. Mr. Belkey does not live at 13537 Fresh property. We're also concerned on how this business is affecting the area, both above and below ground level, water runoff, character of the area. Mr. Belkey has already compromised certain areas, including adjacent landowners' property, MMSD property, which is directly south and east of his property, where fill has piled and leveled out on their property. Currently, Mr. Belkey is running this business illegally from this property, asking that the village board deny Mr. Belkey's request.
Thank you for coming forward. Is there anyone else in the audience that wishes to come forward for citizen input or public appearance at this time? Ma'am?
Hi, I'm Tracy Bernardi. I live at West 13645 Freistadt Road. Our home is directly west of Mr. Belkey's property, where he's been operating the commercial business in the RS2 zoning without proper permits. And since August 24th of 2020, he has been operating against a stop work order. Mr. Belkey has not lived at this property since approximately November 2016. Mr. Belkey is able to enjoy a quiet living at his upscale home at 3812 Sparrowhawk Trail in Colgate, while he financially profits from illegally operating his asphalt construction, concrete construction, snow removal, landscape business, etc., which is right next to us. He alone benefits from this arrangement while we suffer the daily consequences of this very loud and busy construction company. His tax code amendment request is proposed, in my opinion, so that his illegally run business is all of a sudden made legal. We bought our land solely to build our first home. We chose this property because we enjoy nature and the peacefulness that accompanies rural life. The fact that our land is zoned agricultural 1 is not because of the activities operated there, but because of its size. In fact, the tenant farmer rents a very small portion of our land, and the farming that occurs there is extremely minimal and inconsequential to the primary purpose of our land being our residence. We have a large investment in our home and our land, and we or eventually our son plan to subdivide the unoccupied land in the future. To allow a loud, noisy, dusty commercial business to operate in the middle of an area currently becoming residential isn't consistent with what most people want to see or experience in this area. It is also inconsistent with the 2050 plan, which lists our property in the Renwood residential district. Changing the village's code shouldn't be done to benefit just one person, namely Mr. Belkey, but instead because something is missing in the code or a situation has arisen that affects numerous village residents, and therefore the code appropriately needs to be clarified or amended. Mr. Belkey's business started small and functioned at that level for several years, but then over time slowly grew as he added more lines of business. It has now totally outgrown this location, and the activity that occurs there throughout the day, 7 days a week, including holidays, has become very intrusive and is destroying our quality of living from our property. This recent Memorial Day, a worker spent all day operating a payloader and a skid steer to load commercial debris that had been accumulated for several weeks in his concrete bins. There was at least 4 loads of debris loaded into a tri-axle dump truck and removed from the property. This debris that had been loaded up is brought back to the property on a daily basis throughout the day several times and then pushed in the bins with a payloader or skid steer, all while we're hearing the loud rumbling noise and the beeping of the backup alarms. The village already has areas established where Mr. Belkey can operate his business from without adopting this tax code amendment, specifically the business or industrial zoned areas, and those are best suited for Mr. Belkey's business, not next to and near residential homes. The village already has some complaints from residents who live around similar construction, landscape, plowing businesses, and those are operating from within the appropriate zoning, being an A1 or A2, and who went through the proper procedures to get a CUP. So allowing this type of business to operate from a residential 2 zoning makes no logical sense in my opinion. Please do not approve this tax code amendment.
Thank you for coming forward. Is there anyone else that wishes to come forward for citizen input or public appearance that is within our audience tonight? Anyone else?
I'm Sally Wenslow, 13282 Freistadt Road, north side of Freistadt, 2 houses east of the Belkey property. I can see the business from my home. Indescribable noise, traffic, the amount of equipment and vehicles he has there. He has totally outgrown the station. He operates 7 days a week. To have semis delivering mulch where there's only room for 1 vehicle in the yard and the other 2 are out on the road. It's just not working. I hope that you deny this.
Thank you for coming forward. Is there anyone else in our audience that wishes to come forward for citizen input or public appearance at this time? Is there anyone online that wishes to come forward? No, so then we'll go on to our next item on the agenda, which is consent agenda.
Motion to approve Roman numerals 7A through F.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve consent agenda items A through F. Is there any discussion on that motion to approve? No discussion. We'll do a roll call vote, please.
Trustee Myers.
Aye.
Trustee Baum.
Aye.
Trustee Hudson.
Aye.
Trustee Kaminsky. Trustee Rick Miller.
Aye.
Trustee Jan Miller.
Aye.
Trustee Nurrather.
Aye.
Trustee Pieper. Aye. President Walter.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, takes us to the next item, which is new business. We'll start with new business item A, Resolution 15-2021, Wolverine Fireworks Display, Inc., contract in an amount not to exceed $14,862.50. Village portion is $8,000. The Kiwanis portion is $6,862. Who gets the 50 cents?
Motion to approve new business A.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion to approve? No discussion. We'll do roll call vote, please.
Trustee Myers.
Aye.
Trustee Pieper. Aye. Trustee Baum.
Aye.
Trustee Hudson.
Aye.
Trustee Kaminsky.
Aye.
Trustee Rick Miller.
Aye.
Trustee Jan Miller.
Aye.
Trustee Nurrather.
Aye.
President Walter.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Next item under new business is item B, Resolution 16-2021, awarding the sale of $3,200,000 in general obligation promissory notes, Series 2021A, providing the form of the notes and levying a tax in connection therewith. To give us some information and background on this item, we have a representation from Ehlers Public Financial Advisors, and Mr. Philip Cosson is here.
Great, thank you. Good evening, everyone. Phil Costin with Ehlers, good to be back with you. Last month, you gave us authorization to proceed with the 2021 capital borrowing, which is to finance the capital expenditures that you've identified in your 2021 budget. We took bids today at 10:30. There's a process we go through, and I kind of went through that with you last time, but quickly what happened since we last met. A lot of information back and forth between village staff and our firm to put together what's called an offering document, which is like a prospectus on the village. We also had a rating call with Moody's Investor Service. We have the rating report in the document that I passed out prior to the meeting tonight. And then at 10:30 this morning, we took bids. And so I'm going to start by saying we come with great news. We are still kind of roaming around this kind of low historic rate environment, and you'll see that with the results that I'll get into in a little bit. So in the document that you have in front of you, there are a couple of things I'd like to just point out. One, I'd like to start really on page number 8 in the document that I handed out, and that's the rating report. That rating report, anytime you go to the financial markets and issue debt of any type, and you're a rated community, we go through the process of a information share with Moody's Investor Service, and at the same time, then we have a rating call. And I will say this is the first time I've done a rating call with the Village of Germantown without Kim Rath being part of it. So well done by Matthew and Steve, who did a great job representing the village. There's a summary page for Moody's on page number 8 that I want to just touch on a few items. Some of this is very similar from community to community. It doesn't change a lot, but there are some things to point out. So if you look at halfway down or partway down the page, you'll see it says credit strengths, growing tax base located near Milwaukee, healthy financial reserves and liquidity. There's about 15 factors that Moody's looks at when they look at a rating, and they compare you not just to Wisconsin similar credits, but also nationwide. And many of them are financial, as you can imagine. So there's things like, kind of staffing levels, continuity with staff and elected officials. But then there's a whole host of financial demographics or statistics they look at, and then they also look at the demographics of the community. So they identify very strong liquidity and very strong operating budget, and that's because you have a substantial amount of fund balance, and you maintain your fund balance to your fund balance policy. So they recognize that, and they view that as very important. That's your rainy day fund. That's the money you have available to you in case of emergency, and that's, in your case, you're at the level that you've identified, a little bit above the level you identified in your fund balance policy. So they also look at credit challenges for every community that they also provide a opinion on. Strict levy limits restricts the village's revenue raising ability. That's common with everybody in Wisconsin. Everybody is dealing with levy limits, and there is some constraints as a result. And then elevated fixed costs reduces operating flexibility. That's a Wisconsin item as well. If you think about it, Wisconsin does not have a lot of the tools available in some of the surrounding states, sales tax revenue backed bonds and some of those kind of things that are available. So great news. They also give you a little guidance, continued tax-based growth and significant strengthening of operating reserves are the items that you can contribute greater to hopefully maybe at some point elevate above the AA2 rating. And then the potential downgrade would be if you start using some of the fund balance for like operating outside, and you got below your fund balance policy. If you saw significant growth in your debt or pension burdens, and if your tax increment district started to fail, those are items that they have identified as potential credit watch items. So AA2, very strong rating for the village, and that's just an affirmation of what you've had in the past. So back to the first page in is a summary of the bids that were received and the results of the bids that were received today. Again, at 10:30, we took the bids. Similar to any time you bid any capital expenditure, we're really bidding the bonds out or notes out to different banks, underwriters, nationally, locally. You see we had 6 bids that were received. Baird in Milwaukee was the low bid at 0.9829%. So yes, you borrowed 10 years of financing for capital projects at less than 1%. So 0.9829%. The high bid of the 6 was 1.2075%. The difference was about $40,000 between the low and high bid. A couple of things to note. One, what we tend to see these days are what called premium bids. About 90% of the deals are premium. And what that really means is that they provide you a little more money than you actually request. And then what you can do is 2 things with that. One, you can reduce the amount of the obligation. You'll see that's one of the things that we did here. We did drop the amount of the note issue from what was approved at $3.2 million to $3,165,000. So the final resolution you have is the $3,165,000, and that's what would be awarded if you do award tonight. And then second, we have to put money, that premium money, into the debt service fund, which will go to help pay some of the interest payments on these bonds in 2022 and 2023. It just provides a little more flexibility for future financings down the road as well. So on pages 2 and 3 are the actual results of all the different bidders, the tabulation of the bidders. You can see the first page 2 is Baird's bid. They had a large syndicate of bidders they bid with. You can see there's about 20 or so. We see that on a regular basis. Again, 0.9829%. On the following page, we also received bids from Raymond James and Associates out of Memphis, Tennessee, BOK Financial out of Milwaukee, Northland Securities in Minneapolis, BNY Mellon Capital out of Pittsburgh, and FHN Financial Capital Markets out of Memphis, Tennessee. So all names that we see on higher credit communities that are relatively large in size, we'll see them line up. So again, what we're looking for is approval tonight of the $3,165,000, which is again less than what's on your agenda, but the final resolution that was prepared in the lesser amount. Finally, two other points real quick. There's a fold-out page in this document, and that fold-out page, what we identify there is, and I've always talked about the tax impact analysis. I think there's going to be more discussion about this as you get further along in your public works facility discussion. We'll probably come back with a number of scenarios to show the impact of that financially, like we've done in the past. But what you see, if you look at that fold-out page, the fourth column from the right is the tax rate for debt. You can see in 2021, it was $1.10 per thousand. In 22, which includes this issue, is $1.01 per thousand, so 9 cents per thousand less. And you can see it's scheduled to drop off each year. So when I talk about flexibility to take on future capital expenditures, that's what we're talking about. You do have a declining tax rate for debt, which is great, because what it does is enable you to take on future capital and hopefully not see a significant spike in the tax rate. And that's always the goal when we look at doing capital borrowing. So that's one item. And then the second on page 7, the next page, is your borrowing capacity calculation. And we're always looking at that because that is one of the measures that Moody's looks at as well when they look at the rating. How much debt do you have and how do you compare to other similar rated communities? And you can see, including this issue that we just undertook, you're at 35% of your borrowing capacity, meaning you have plenty of capacity. It's easy to borrow money. It's hard to pay it back, right? It's like your home at home as well, right? You can always go out and borrow money. It's got to pay it back. But you have capacity and you're not bumping up against any thresholds that would be a challenge. For a community your size, we would still like to see you retain somewhere around 50, 60, or 40 to 50% of your borrowing capacity going forward. So as you start talking about the public works facility again and some of the larger capital, we'll also be analyzing your borrowing capacity just to make sure it fits within kind of what we would expect to see for a similar rated community like Germantown. So great results, a lot of interest, good rating being affirmed, and 10-year money at less than 1%. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions, board? Questions? Thanks.
Motion to approve new business item B, 3.165.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve Resolution 16, 2021 that awards the sale of general obligation promissory notes at $3,165,000. Any discussion on that motion to approve? Discussion? Do roll call vote, please.
Trustee Myers.
Aye.
Trustee Rick Miller.
Aye.
Trustee Baum.
Aye.
Trustee Hudson.
Aye.
Trustee Kaminsky.
Aye.
Trustee Jan Miller.
Aye.
Trustee Narvether.
Aye.
Trustee Pieper.
No.
President Walter.
Aye.
Motion carried.
Thank you, Phil. Next item under new business is item C, denial of operator's license for Angel D. Clemmerson. Chief, give us a little input and background on this. Chief of Police Mike Snow.
Thank you. The primary reason for the denial here is the fact the applicant is on probation for neglect of a child. The condition of the probation stipulates the applicant cannot enter any bars, taverns, clubs, liquor stores, or any establishment where alcohol is primarily sold or served. The applicant indicates she is looking for operator's license to work at Speedway. So obviously that is not their primary business. There was some questions we had about the probation, and the guidance that we received was somewhat vague And we were hoping to get more clarification from the applicant on this matter.
This came before public safety.
Yes.
Was a discussion and vote. What was the outcome?
I think it was the 3-1.
2-2.
2-2. Thank you for the correction.
Okay. And did your, or you got your input from, was that from our village attorney or from where? And if not our village attorney, I'd like to hear what his input is.
We did receive some guidance tonight. Prior to that, though, we were working off of criminal history that was provided to us from DOT.
So based on the outline of her probation and being that Speedway is not what would be considered a bar or a liquor store, what, or
Yeah, so basically the same advice or discussion that we had with public safety. It's a little bit of an unusual situation in that the conviction here is just a misdemeanor, so it's not a felony, so there's not an automatic bar by statute. Even though it was charged initially as a felony, you go by what the actual conviction is. The probation status is the one that kind of raises some concerns, both I think for the police department and for our office. And effectively the two sides of the argument. On the one side, you have the camp that I think the police chief and myself fall into, which is we should not actively be encouraging folks to violate conditions of their probation. It's effectively asking them to violate the law or authorizing them to violate the law. The flip side of that would be the argument that says it's not our job to police that. If she's going to go and work there, her probation agent is going to find out about it, and then she's going to suffer whatever consequences she has for doing it, and it really shouldn't be our role for doing it. As I say, I fall into that first camp, I think, personally, because I do think that we are effectively condoning her violating the conditions of her probation, and I certainly would not want to be the one standing in front of a judge explaining to them why we granted a license when we are aware of the fact that she was on probation and shouldn't be serving alcohol. In terms of the issue of primary versus not primary purpose of the particular establishment, I think even though clearly Speedway is a gas station, I think that the level of alcohol that's served and the fact that she would be directly involved in selling it unsupervised, because that's what her license would allow her to do, probably is a violation of that probation. That would be my guess.
Board, Trustee Pieper.
Can I ask what the length of her probation is?
It's 1 year.
When did that start?
You give me a second. I think it was not that long ago, just June, I think, but term of probation was 1 year. Sentencing date was February 22nd.
This year?
Correct.
Okay.
So the actual judgment of conviction was the 24th, so that's probably the date they work off of.
So I'm gonna go, I'm gonna take Dan Wing's stance and I'm gonna make a motion to approve her license. I do not think we should police her. Her probation officer is obviously going to know about her employment there and would put a stop to that way before you would go in front of a judge saying why we approved her bartending license.
Motion made. Do I have a second?
Second for discussion.
Motion made and seconded. Discussion. Trustee Kaminsky.
So in this situation, because alcohol is sold at that particular store and she's going to have to handle it, I get that. What about if it was a Piggly Wiggly or a Pick and Save? Would it be the same? Yeah, I'm thinking this woman has to get employment somewhere. So would that be the same thing or not?
I think a lot of our concern was just not knowing, just based on the information we have, if this is technically a violation of that probation, we would have just felt better if she would have showed up to maybe answer to some of these questions that would have made us a bit more at ease of approving this.
So any place that sells alcohol, whether or not she would handle it, would she not be allowed to work there?
I think the key distinction that likely will play into whether it's a violation or not is whether she's the one that's actively doing the serving. I think that, she's under an absolute sobriety condition. She's got the condition that the chief read. Clearly, they're trying to keep her away from alcohol, period. And so I think that the key really for her is she going to be the one that is actively selling the alcohol or not?
Right.
And certainly granting a license gives her the ability to do that without any supervision.
So anybody at a grocery store that checks out your liquor or bottle of wine or whatever, they have to have a license for that?
No, because you have a licensed bartender or server on staff typically.
So she could still work at a store like that. She could get that type of employment.
Right. And certainly if she was here, I would recommend to her that if she was in that circumstance and she had somebody that came to her and had alcohol, that she would do just like the teenagers do.
Right.
Call somebody else over to scan it for her so that she wasn't actively doing it. But again, that's, ultimately for her to work out with her probation agent in terms of what is and isn't going
My
to be
concern just
acceptable.
being that we're not taking her out of the employment picture entirely, which certainly can't be helpful to somebody like this at all if they can't earn a living. And as long as she can be employed at a place that also sells alcohol, then I'm okay with it.
Okay with what?
I'm okay with where you guys stand personally of not allowing the license for this particular case.
Trustee Peeper?
I know it states that she should not work in an establishment where alcohol is, where the primary focus of that business is selling or serving alcohol. She wouldn't be serving alcohol, would be selling it. And by restricting her and not even letting her be able to work alone, perhaps, is going to restrict her opportunities that she could potentially have. She's applying at Speedway. She's not applying at Northwestern Mutual or something. So obviously she's struggling to get a job, and we're even limiting her more than that.
She could
has
get a job at
probation.
Northwest Mutual, though.
Could she though?
They don't
what are
serve
their
alcohol.
policies? Well, what's their policy?
Well, that policy is up to however they want, but for whatever reason, the judgment and the outline of her parole, for reasons that we weren't involved in because we weren't at the case, and we could probably read the record, is they're trying to limit her exposure
I do
in
believe
all
I have the
ways.
floor.
Yeah, I am the chair.
Thank you.
Yes.
I do not think that we should limit her in where she can and cannot work. She has a probation officer that is going to know where she applied, where she's getting hired, and her probation officer would put a stop to it immediately. She's got several more months of probation applying at Speedway. She's not applying for some awesome, crazy job. She obviously is looking for work, and we're limiting her from even working at Speedway. It's ridiculous to me, and I think we should just approve it. Her crime didn't have anything to do with alcohol. Yes, there are limits on her absolute sobriety, but her crime did not have to do with alcohol. She did not get a DUI. She has no past history of crimes with alcohol at all. We have looked her up, and I think this should be approved. I don't care that she's not here.
Further discussion? Trustee Rick Miller.
So there's two things that bother me about this. Number one, she can work anywhere. She just can't close, right? You need a operator's license to be there alone and possibly close the place. So she can still work there. Second is that the liquor license is not attached to a business. It's attached to the village, which means that when bartenders apply somewhere else, they didn't know about this misdemeanor, she would be violating parole and get a job at some other bar. So for that reason, I will not approve this.
Trustee Hudson.
Could you read the terms of her probation, please?
Maintain absolute sobriety, do not consume, possess any alcohol, and do not enter any bars, taverns, clubs, liquor stores, or any establishment where alcohol is primarily sold or served.
Hudson, you still have the floor. Further discussion? Trustee Kaminsky.
I just have another question. Couldn't she have just gone to her probation officer and asked if this job was okay? And we wouldn't be having this discussion if he said it was okay?
I would assume.
She can answer that.
I guess the trick is, and I actually just typed a message to the chief, just asking if they called the PO, because like some of our other communities, they do that. He doesn't know because he wasn't the one that did the background on it, so he's not sure whether the PO was contacted or not in this case. But certainly, I mean, that could be, you know, that if she was applying for this type of position, it wouldn't be unheard of for her to say to her PO, hey, you know, call the village and tell them that this is okay. We've had that happen in other communities, so it certainly could happen here.
Be okay. We just don't know that it may be okay because that circle has not been completed. So we would be denying her the possibility of employment until having to come before this board again in 2 weeks. Am I correct? For her to find out. I mean,
It's not a denial of employment.
I have a little bit of
oh,
trouble
we're
with
not
that
denying,
statement.
okay, we're not denying employment. We're denying her opportunity in this case.
Well, I mean, what you're doing is you're denying her the ability to work at Speedway alone.
Right.
She could continue to work there. I mean, I assume she's working there already.
We're denying her the license that gives her that ability. The actual actions of whatever was the result of her parole were hurt.
Well, I don't care what that is.
So now it becomes, you have to live your life under these guidelines for this long of time based on the result of that judgment. For us to say, okay, we don't agree with that judgment, we think that we're going to hang our ability to provide a license on one word of how that parole is stated, where it says primary, and Speedway is not a primarily in the business of selling liquor, but it still tries to restrict her, for whatever reason, based on the judge and the result of her case, from being around, in front of, or the ability to get liquor. So for us to sit here and play judge and jury on something that's already been decided in effect by the outline of her parole, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to go with the recommendation of our police department and our village attorney, which we have on board for these reasons. And if she wants an opportunity to reapply there under a different set of circumstances, she has that ability. We're not limiting her ability to work. We're limiting her ability to close and get a license to sell liquor at this facility. There's other places and other opportunities for her to work. And after her parole has been served, then she has more freedom based on the result of the actions taken that got her in this situation. Further discussion, Trustee Kaminsky.
I don't disagree. In fact, I guess where I'm netting out on this, it was her responsibility to talk to her patrol officer or to be at this meeting explaining this. I mean, it's not ours, it's hers.
Further discussion? No further discussion? All right, so let's read the motion so everybody's clear on what we're voting on.
Motion to approve the operator's license for Angel Clemmerson.
Okay. Any further discussion on that motion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, raise your hands. Motion fails. Next item under new business. Thank you, Chief. Is item D, ordinance 04-2021, an ordinance amending chapter 17 of the zoning code, amending section 17.15 subsection 2 and creating section 17.15 subsection 4 for conditional use, which has minimum requirements, and the applicant and a person submitting it is Jason Belkey, who is located at North 120 West 13537 Freistadt Road. Text amendment to zoning code section 17.15 subsection 2 and 17.15 subsection 4 of the Germantown Municipal Code pertaining to conditional uses allowed in the RS2 single-family zoning district. First question I have is Mr. Belke either in our audience or joining us via WebEx? Reason that I asked this is I did receive a text message from Mr. Belke asking if we could possibly postpone this until our next meeting. Reason being, he is currently ill and is coughing so severely that he didn't want to be coming into this room, which I think is a great idea. And he had asked if we would consider postponing. This board does not have to, but it can be part of the consideration. He wanted to be able to state his case before this body personally. And that was the reason he's asking for the delay.
Make a motion to postpone.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion to postpone? Trustee Bohm?
Hasn't this been postponed prior meetings?
It was postponed at the Plan Commission meeting
Yeah, so,
because he couldn't make that particular meeting. And we did still hold a public hearing.
yeah, I'm not willing to postpone it. This has just been lagging on and lagging on. Sooner we get it resolved, the sooner residents can move on with their lives, the sooner the applicant can change what he needs to change to move on with his life.
Further discussion? Trustee Kaminsky?
I just believe Mr. Belke has he has an opportunity to be here and state his case. That's the fair way to go about this. I read the Plan Commission minutes and I agree. I know what's been going on. That does not erase the fact that if he is legitimately sick, I think we can hold this over for, nothing's going to happen for 2 more weeks. I think that's the fair and right thing to do.
Further discussion?
Call for the
Trustee Hudson?
We have a group of citizens that inconvenienced tonight showed up. Sorry that Mr. Belke is ill. We should vote this evening.
point of order.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Point of order, please.
What are we voting on?
And what do you want it to be?
Did we have a second? I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Yes, we did.
I'm sorry. Thank you.
Any further discussion on the motion to postpone? No further discussion. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed?
I,
Opposed, raise your hands. Motion fails. So we start. Ordinance 04-2021, amending Chapter 17, as I had stated earlier when I read the new business item. To give us more background and information on this item, I'll turn the meeting over to our Community Development Director, Jeff Retzloff. Mr. Retzloff.
Thank you, Mr. President. Can everybody hear me? Good. Jason Bilkey has proposed a series of code amendments to our zoning code. 2 amendments specifically. Proposed amendment number 1 to section 17.15 sub 2, the conditional use section in the RS2 single family residential district. The proposal is to add the following uses to the list of conditional uses that may be permitted in the RS2 district: construction services and contractor shops, garden supplies, and horticultural services. The second amendment is to section 17.15 sub 4, actually a new section to be created that would read that the conditional uses permitted under section 17.15 sub 2, construction services, contractor shops, and sub L, garden supplies and horticultural services shall be permitted only where the property meets the following conditions. A, the property is comprised of 4 acres or more, and B, the property is surrounded on all sides by property zoned A1 agricultural or A2 agricultural. Given the basis for the amendment, I'm going to show the property location for context. Bilkey property is 4 acres in size. It's located a 1/4 mile east of Country Air Drive on Freistadt Road on the south side of Freistadt. Here's another aerial view of the property. As you can see, the back portion of the property contains a series of bins for garden supply, landscaping supplies, and equipment associated with the business on the property. along with 3 detached accessory buildings. The amendment initiated by Mr. Bilkey he states in support of his amendment that it's necessary because the RS2 zoning district doesn't allow the best use of his 4-acre parcel, which is a business use. And also that the RS2 zoning district provides no benefit to other properties or the village overall that would result if an amendment allowed to allow his business to remain in operation. Mr. Bilkey states that the property is best suited for construction and contracting operations because the business is similar to horticultural services that are allowed in the A1 and A2 districts, and that his property is surrounded by large A1 and A2 zone parcels. Mr. Bilkey was issued a code violation notice in 2020 for operating a landscaping, construction, and snow plowing business in violation of the RS2 single-family district. In the course of discussing how to remedy that code violation, a series of alternatives were identified for Mr. Bilkey, in addition to ceasing operation and relocating the business elsewhere. Those alternatives included acquiring 6+ acres of land from an adjacent property and combine it with the 4 acres that he currently owns for a total of 10, and to rezone that 10-acre area from RS2 to either A2 agricultural and obtain a conditional use permit for horticultural services, which again is allowed in the A2 zoning district with a conditional use permit. Another option was to apply for a conditional use permit as a major home occupation. Unfortunately, Mr. Bilkey doesn't live on the property and wasn't eligible for that opportunity. The third alternative was to petition the village to amend the RS2 district regulations in some manner to allow the existing operation, which is the opportunity or the alternative that Mr. Bilkey has elected at this point in time to pursue. Mr. Bilkey indicates that he has attempted to acquire the 6 acres of land from MMSD, the property that lies adjacent to his on screen. It's land to the right or to the east. Mr. Bilkey indicated he has been unsuccessful in that attempt. As I mentioned, Mr. Bilkey's CUP application for a major home occupation was rejected by staff due to not meeting the definition and requirements for a major home occupation. Mr. Bilkey doesn't live on the property. The operation itself has 12 to 15 employees and exceeds the number of employees allowed for a home occupation in the RS2 single-family residential district, which allows 2 to 3 employees maximum. As I mentioned, the zoning code text amendment is the alternative that Mr. Bilkey has elected to pursue. He has also filed an appeal with the Board of Zoning Appeals to appeal the administrative decision of staff to reject his conditional use permit application for a home occupation permit. That appeal is pending before the Board of Zoning Appeals and is tentatively scheduled for sometime in July. With respect to the amendments that are proposed, it is staff's opinion and generally accepted practice amongst my peers and those involved in comprehensive land use planning and zoning law that the purpose of a zoning code is to implement the public interest as determined by the village board through the adoption of land use and development policies in our comprehensive plan. And zoning code amendments, therefore, whether they be a map rezoning or a text amendment, as in this case, must be made for the purpose of improving or enhancing the overall public interest and should not be for the exclusive benefit and interest of just one property owner. Zoning code text amendments should be consistent with the comprehensive plan, particularly the future land use plan mapping element. They shouldn't result in unlawful exclusionary zoning. They should correct errors in current code or clarify text with internal conflicts or ambiguous interpretations. They should update the code to address any changes in Wisconsin statutes or other village ordinances. And they should resolve any potential legal issues given recent case law or court decisions or opinions that come up subsequent to the adoption of the zoning code. Mr. Bilkey's text amendment is for the exclusive benefit of his own personal and business interests and to provide relief from the pending code violations. not for any public interest or public purpose. This is a conclusion and intention supported by Mr. Bilkey's application itself and part of his own argument that the amendments are would only affect him and his property. The village zoning code implements the policies of our comprehensive plan using a district concept, each with unique list of uses and regulations. We have 2 agricultural districts, 13 residential districts, 5 business districts, 1 institutional district, 4 industrial districts, all of which provide separation of different and potentially incompatible uses. Our zoning code already allows the uses that Mr. Bilkey is proposing to add to the RS2 residential district. It's just that those uses are allowed in other districts that are not residential districts. On this graphic, I tried to present the zoning districts within which the 4 uses that Mr. Bilkey is proposing to add to the RS2 district, where they're actually allowed in the village. The first row, construction services, it's not allowed in an agricultural district. It is allowed in our B3 and our B5 business districts with a conditional use permit. It is a use allowed in the M1 limited industrial district as a permitted use. And as mentioned earlier, construction services, while not specifically listed, could arguably be a home occupation subject to limitations that apply in the zoning district or in the zoning code, specifically things such as the number of employees, the location of where the business can actually be run from on the property, etc. Moving on, contractor shops, again, not allowed in an agricultural district, but they are allowed in the B3 and the B5 business districts, and also allowed in the M1 limited industrial district, and also could possibly be allowed as a home occupation, again, with a conditional use permit and subject to limitations. Garden supplies, that type of use is allowed in both the A1 and the A2 district with a conditional use permit. It is allowed in the B1, the B2, and the B3 business districts, and also the M1 limited industrial district. Again, garden supply type uses could also be a home occupation with a conditional use permit and subject to limitations. And finally, horticultural services, like garden supplies, allowed in the A1 and A2, the B1, the B2, and the B3 business, and the M1 limited industrial districts, and possibly as a home occupation with a conditional use permit. Our zoning district system is not a perfect system. Separate but abutting districts can and have conflicts and nuisances associated with them. For example, we have certain agricultural districts that next to residential districts that have specific uses that have created problems for us in the past. In some cases, the character and intensity of a specific use can change over time. A good example is horticultural services. That type of use has sort of grown and expanded from what used to be a sort of a very low intensity nursery stock selling, mulch providing, lawn maintenance sort of operation that has evolved into the types of construction businesses that we see quite common that have nursery stock, sell mulch, provide lawn maintenance services, but also have moved into the hardscape construction type uses where they build patios and kitchens and all sorts of things associated with decks and patios and single family properties. And they all have evolved in some way with much larger and heavier machinery. And a lot of businesses have also evolved into, not just seasonal operations, but year-round operations that include snow plowing, vehicles, a good example for those of you that have been here for quite some time. We do have horticultural services that is a changing use in the village of Germantown, and it is a situation where we have some uses allowed, existing uses in agricultural districts that have created conflicts with adjoining residential districts. The TLC Acres Nursery and Landscaping Operation, it's a property approximately 50 acres in size. It's zoned A2 agricultural, and we've had conflicts with adjoining residential districts. the Wendland Landscaping Services operation on Division. Similarly, 10-acre plus in size, A2 zone agricultural, and there have been conflicts over time with nearby residential areas. So it's not uncommon to have uses that are allowed in certain zoning districts, but still have created conflicts and nuisances with abutting residential districts. And as you've heard from some of the residents who have expressed their opposition to this amendment, they're aware of and want to avoid those sorts of situations in their own neighborhoods. As I mentioned earlier, the purpose of the zoning code is to implement land use and development policies in our comprehensive plan. In our 2020 land use plan, the area is classified as rural residential, the area within which the Bilkey property is located. On screen is the current 2020 land use plan map. The Bilkey property, 4 acres in size, is highlighted in red in the middle of the graphic there. The yellow is areas that are classified as rural residential and intended to be developed and used for residential uses on properties 1 acre, 2 acres in size. The rural residential area was classified on our future land use map as a transitional area for residential uses that are not served by public water and sewer, but rather on on-site sanitary and private wells, again, on lots 1 acre or more in size. I've highlighted a couple of the existing developing areas nearby, areas including Harvest Hills, which is a new single-family development about 1/4 to a half mile east on Freistadt Road. The Woodland Ponds development, also about a half mile east of Harvest Hills on Freistadt Road, and the Wrenwood development. It's west on Freistadt Road, and the north part of the Wrenwood development will be coming in for development approvals relatively soon. All of those developments are single-family residential developments that are characteristic of the type and density development that the current 2020 land use plan map encourages to take place in this particular location. I've brought a graphic that shows, for example, the TLC property, again, situated in agricultural area. It's classified as agricultural, it's zoned agricultural, but it lies abutting a rural residential area where we have conflicts where this type of horticultural services use is currently in operation. Our 2050 plan, currently draft, our neighborhood district and corridor concept plan, designates the area south of Freistadt Road as a residential neighborhood, also intended for single-family lots, 20,000 square feet or larger, given the extension of our sewer service area along Country Air Drive. The areas in yellow are neighborhoods that have been identified. I think earlier we heard from one of the members of the public indicating their property is located in the Wrenwood neighborhood that lies abutting and west of the Bilkey property south of Freistadt Road, the Woodland Ponds and Harvest Hill neighborhood to the east. As I mentioned earlier, these are areas that are developing currently and are consistent with the current 2020 plan as well as the 2050 plan. The only difference here is that on the 2050 plan, we are acknowledging the existence of the roughly 35-acre property owned by MMSD that has a perpetual conservation easement on it. And so we've identified and included that in the rural preservation area shown in green on the 2050 land use plan map. Mr. Bilkey's argument that his property is best suited for a construction and contracting business because it is surrounded by rural property zoned for A1 and A2 agricultural uses is not the village's vision nor intention for the area under either the 2020 plan or the 2050 comprehensive land use plan. The existing conditions that have been suggested as a further amendment to the RS2 district, where the property has to be 4 acres and surrounded by A1 and A2 agriculturally zoned properties. While that may be a condition that currently exists around the Bilkey property, It is not a condition that is intended to be for much longer under our 2020 and our 2050 plan. Those conditions would be short-lived in this particular area as development continues, consistent with our planning efforts. With that in mind, the Plan Commission recommendation from their meeting in May was to deny the proposed text amendment to amend the section 17.15 of the RS2 residential zoning district and not add the contractor shop, construction services, garden supplies, and horticultural services to the conditional use section. At this point, we would give Mr. Bilkey an opportunity to come. Don't know if maybe he's jumped on in the meantime.
If anybody has joined us via WebEx, Emily? Thank you. Yep, okay. Board? Any questions? Discussion, motions?
I will make a motion to, got to do it in the positive. So I'll make a motion to approve the ordinance amending chapter 17 as presented.
Motion made. Do we have a second?
I'll second. For
Motion
discussion.
made and seconded. Discussion. Trustee Baum.
As I stated at the Plan Commission level, I will not support this. I will vote against approving it. This has been a problem going back a number of years. I've been getting phone calls from residents for predominantly the past year, but it's been going back long before that. This is simply a business who is successful. It has outgrown its location. I've had a business. I was successful. I outgrew my space. I had to move. Simple as that. That's where this business is, and trying to step around the ordinance and change the ordinance is really just for his benefit and for nobody else's. So I will not support this motion.
Further discussion? I would add that I would echo what Trustee Baum is saying, and I have also stated at the Plan Commission meeting that anytime that we see a business of this type in a residential community, it does cause problems for us long term. So we need to learn from those types of situations as they present themselves. As we can see in our 2050 plan and our current 2020 plan, this doesn't work for this area. What we're projecting and trying to grow in this area is more residentially based. We also have some success that is occurring in that way, whether it be Renwood or any of the other Harvest Hills or developments that are happening in that area. So for that reason, I would deny this request because it really doesn't fit into the residential neighborhoods that we have projected here. And it is, again, more self-serving for the situation as it is today and would not fit into our plan going forward. So that is why I would vote against it. Further discussion? Trustee Jan Miller.
Thank you. I would just like to add that I have heard from residents and they're not happy about the activity on the Belkey property. And for that reason, I would deny this as well. I really think it's very important that we keep with the 2050 plan if we're to grow this community as we're planning, and add some things that really fit the neighborhoods. Thank you.
Further discussion? No further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Aye.
Aye. Motion fails.
One extension.
One abstention? All right, so one abstention, one against, I'm sorry, one approving and the rest against, so the motion fails. Trustee Baum.
For the director, Next steps in this, I believe you said they're going to Board of Zoning Appeals for the residents that are,
There has been an appeal filed of the zoning administrator's determination to reject the conditional use permit application for a home-based business. I don't know the exact date. Deanna might know at this point,
It's the second Wednesday in July.
second Wednesday in July. So
14th.
as of today, we would be scheduling that appeal at that particular date. I don't know if the outcome of tonight changes that. I don't know, Brian, if
Nothing changes from our perspective, whether they change their approach.
So for the benefit of the residents, what does that mean for Mr. Belke and his ability to operate his business as it is today?
Well, at this point, it's been my decision to not pursue enforcement of the code violation that deals with the operation of the landscaping business, pending the outcome of his applications. If he goes to the Board of Zoning Appeals as he's applied for and is successful in having the board effectively overturn the zoning administrator decision to reject his CUP application, then arguably he could be coming back before the Plan Commission and the Village Board with a conditional use permit application for his business as a home occupation. And processing it.
So he's not going to the Board of Zoning Appeals based on his amendment. He's going based on your denial of his home occupation application? Say that fast.
Right.
Yes.
Wow, okay. I think he had a better chance this way, but okay, good. That's easy because he doesn't live there. That seems like a strange way to go, but okay. Trustee Kaminsky.
My only comment is I voted for this because I don't think it's fair for him to not be here to tell his side of the story to the entire village board. I agree that it's not a good thing. And I'm sure if he was here, I still probably wouldn't agree with him specifically. But I think he has that right to be here. And I don't think it's fair for us to move ahead without that input.
We did have previous meeting notes as to what his input and statements were during those two meetings. Okay, other questions? Other questions? Residents? Okay, well, we appreciate you coming. We appreciate your input in regards to public input and comments, and also for all those that spoke at the public hearings. Thank you for spending time with us, and if you have any questions, feel free to call any of us on the board, and we'll do our best to answer your questions and your concerns. So thank you. Next item under new business is item E, Heritage Place Joint Venture LLC at North 115 West 16165 Saxony Village Boulevard and North 115 West 16225 Saxony Square, Building 1, Land 15 LLC, North 116 West 16261 Main Street, MCB Investments LLC, North 116 West 16257 Main Street, a two-lot certified survey map to combine parcels. To give us more background and information on this new business item, I'll turn our meeting over to our Associate Planner, Emily Zant.
Thank you. Heritage Place Joint Venture is seeking approval of a two-lot certified survey map to reconfigure the three parcels located at Saxony Village, south of Main Street. The purpose of this reconfiguration is to clean up the existing parcels and to designate the open space along Main Street as a separate parcel. You can see on the image on the screen, there's a green space there, and it will become lot 2 of the certified survey map. Due to the minimal frontage of that will become lot 1 of the certified survey map. And due to the limited frontage of lot 1 along Main Street, and in an effort to minimize the number of driveways onto Main Street, planning staff does recommend requiring an access restriction prohibiting vehicular access to Main Street along the entire width of parcel 1. And an access easement on parcel or lot 2 that runs the entire length of lot 1's frontage abutting Saxony Village Boulevard for the benefit of lot 1 to allow one access driveway in the location to be mutually agreed upon by the Village of Germantown and Saxony Village property owner. The Village Engineering Department did identify a few technical corrections in their memo dated May 4th of this year. A revised CSM with the necessary corrections must be submitted and approved by the Engineering Department prior to recording of the CSM. So the Plan Commission did recommend approval of the 2-lot certified survey map to reconfigure the existing 3 parcels of Saxony Village into 2 lots with 3 conditions. Scott Bentz, the applicant, is with us via WebEx this evening if you have any questions.
Okay.
Motion to approve new business E.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion to approve? Trustee Miller?
Just a question on the easement. So you're saying parcel 1, there won't be a driveway going on to Main Street, right? So there's a current driveway, I guess, into Saxony Village, and they're going to somehow use that. It's going to be a shared type driveway onto Main Street?
Correct. So there would be a access easement reservation along that driveway to allow access to.
And whatever's built there, then you can decide where it's going to go on that.
Correct.
On that
Correct.
parcel. Okay, thank you.
Further discussion? No further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? None opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Bench, for joining us tonight. Next item under new business is Harvest Hills Subdivision LLC, Lot 31, Harvest Hills Subdivision, and Jeffrey L. and Sarah M. Holtenbeck at North 118 West 13147 Taylor Trail, Lot 30, Harvest Hills Subdivision, 2 lots certified survey map to adjust property lines. To give us more information on this new business item, again, we'll turn it over to our Associate Planner, Emily Zant.
Thank you. Harvest Hills Subdivision LLC is seeking approval of a 2-lot certified survey map to modify the boundaries between Lot 30 and Lot 31 of the Harvest Hills Subdivision located on Taylor Trail. The subject property is zoned RS3 residential and is budding RS3 residential to the north, to the east, and to the south, and there's an outlot along the west property line. The purpose of the boundary modification is to accommodate a new septic system for the existing dwelling located on Lot 30. The original location for the septic system was compacted during construction. So the proposed CSM simply moves the northern eastern property line highlighted in the blue dashed line on your screen to the east 70 feet to add that space in between to lot 30. Soil evaluations have been completed for lots 1 and 2 of the CSM, and locations have been approved by Washington County as suitable sites for septic systems. Both proposed lots resulting from the CSM will meet the minimum lot size and allow for all setback requirements in the RS3 zoning district to be met. The village surveyor did identify a few technical corrections in a memo dated April 5th, 2021, and a revised CSM has been submitted for review and is awaiting final approval by the engineering department. So it is the Plan Commission's recommendation to approve the proposed 2-lot certified survey map to modify the boundary between lots 30 and 31 of the Harvest Hills subdivision located on Taylor Trail with the following conditions, addressing the technical issues on the plans identified by the village surveyor in the memo dated April 5th, 2021.
Make a motion to approve the 2-lot certified survey map as presented.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion to approve?
Question.
Trustee Kaminsky.
These are both mound systems, right? The one that failed and the one that they're going to redo?
The one that failed is they're going to rebuild that one. And yes, it's a.
They're both
mound
mounds,
system. I
though.
believe.
They're not, no conventional.
I believe they're mound systems.
Okay.
Swapping one area for another.
I'm just, oh, never mind.
Further discussion? No further discussion. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Are there any opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. Next item under new business is item G, approve easement for Heritage Place Joint Venture LLC for the Saxony Village.
Motion to approve new business G.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion to approve? No discussion. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
One opposed. Motion carries. Next item under new business is item H, meter install project, increased spending authority of quoted cost of meters in the amount not to exceed $478,500. Give us more information and background on this. We have the Director of the Water Department. Sir.
Good evening. So tonight what we got before you is the Water Utility reported at the April 2021 Public Works Committee meeting and again June 2nd Public Works Committee meeting that the Germantown's meter reading equipment is failing or ready to fail, and the meter batteries are failing at a pace that we cannot keep up with our current replacement schedule. The Water Utility would like to provide our concept plan to complete a contract service meter install project. We would like to solicit bids for the installation side of the project with an estimated cost of around $237,000. Meter costs are quoted at $478,500. And we also are capturing a $45,000 savings by this bulk meter order. Fortunately, soon there will be an increase of 5% or around $24,000 added to the quoted meter cost. Per the village administrator Krecklow, we can review the cash flow and or use an additional interfund loan if necessary or available private funding options. However, we need approval from the board to spend the money. First approval needed to increase our budgetary authority and then approval of the meter installation contract. Below is our recommendation for tonight. And if there's any questions, I can take those, or funding questions would go to Administrator.
Trustee Myers.
Thank you. Paul, two questions. You gave us two different numbers, the 478 and then another number. Is that correct? Are we supposed to be voting on both of these tonight?
Right. So the
But
initial
only one is listed.
Yeah. So the initial 478,500 is the base cost. Just recently, we were informed by the meter vendor that there's going to be a 5% increase. So we're going to ask for both for a total of 502,500. In case the option to provide funding takes a little longer than expected.
The second question, Paul, there's money in the budget for both of these items for the 502, 500?
No, that's the reason for possible funding options, borrowing.
Besides what you had talked about, 45,000. Thank you.
Trustee Narrator.
Last week at Public Works, we talked about the two funding resources, which reason why I oppose it. Has anything changed in that regards, Steve, since that time?
There have been no changes in the funding situation related to the water utility since last week. Maybe if I could just provide a little bit of background for the full board and for the public. The water utility is past due for a rate increase, and there are cash flow issues within the water utility. We have seen the cash balance for the utility declining for several years now, which has been tightening up and causing some delays in replacements of equipment and infrastructure like the meters that Mr. Haugen has been talking about here the last couple of minutes. what I mentioned to the Public Works Committee as a way of working through that issue is the possibility of an interfund loan. We do have in the general fund reserves beyond what our policy of 25%, and that could more than cover the amount of funding that's needed for the meter replacement. The general fund, if you think of them, they're basically different funds within a municipal government function as different business entities governed by the same governing body. So the general fund could issue a loan to the water utility, a short-term loan. The water utility would have to pay a reasonable amount of interest under the financial guidelines that we're required to follow, and they would have to pay that back. But it would allow the project to move forward and cover the cash flow issues. I would not recommend that if it were not for the next item that's on the agenda this evening, the water rate application that is continuing to move forward, and that we have made some progress on that with the Public Service Commission. So I do think that it is likely that that is in place within the next several months. So so it is something that is outside of what I would generally recommend as a good practice in financial management for a municipality. I think that in this case, the concerns about the viability of the meters, the number of issues that we have with every quarterly water billing that goes forward with residents who are getting incorrect bills, have failed meters, and we're literally getting hundreds of calls every quarter when the bills go out from residents who are upset and concerned about this. And because of that, I would recommend to the village board that we go forward. I can't state for certain what the amount of the interfund loan that would be necessary. And that's something I can come back to the village board on as we get further in the process. But I would recommend that we take this first step in authorizing the water utility to go forward and get proposals and contracts in place for both the purchase of the meters and the installation.
Trustee Jan Miller.
It says that you bid these meters out. Were there other companies? I'm only seeing one here.
No, so back in 2013 was the, I guess, the historical marker where the conversion started from one meter vendor to another. And you want to, as a utility, stay with one meter vendor. So we do not get other quotes at this time. We stayed with the current vendor that we have.
So that all the parts are the same?
Correct,
and you have
right.
continuity?
Mhm.
2,900, is that enough? Is that too many units? I believe it's 2,900.
That would complete the change out of what's left.
Okay, so every other meter has been upgraded.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Further discussion? Trustee Kaminsky.
And just one additional comment to what you had said, Paul. Part of our problem here, we were working on replacing X number of these meters. How many, Paul, each year?
Well, again, starting in 2013, if they would have maybe accelerated that rate at 600 to 700, we wouldn't be here. They were doing about 300 to 400. I started in 17. We tried to ramp that up. COVID-19 hit.
That's what I was going to point out. Last year, we couldn't get into any homes, put in any meters, so we fell even more dramatically behind while they are breaking down at a pretty rapid rate. I would support the intergovernment loan. I would not support us going to get a loan from the manufacturer. If we can make that work without hurting our bond rating, because we are going to be looking obviously for a big chunk of money to put together a public works building. That'd be my only caveat on that. But otherwise, I would say definitely do it, keep it in-house.
Further discussion?
That a motion? All right. I'll make a motion to approve the purchase of the water meters and installation for $502,500 and go with an interfund loan to finance it.
Second.
Motion made and seconded.
So I have one question, Paul, and that is, or I shouldn't have a question. We did go through this in Public Works, but we have two reading software or hardware packages right now, and the old one is failing.
Correct.
So we don't need any new equipment to read the meters when this conversion takes over.
Correct.
Further discussion on the motion to approve? I have a question. So every year we've been replacing them out and we have just 2,900 left?
Correct.
Okay, so the 478.5 buys the 2,900 meters?
We're asking for 502 in case the funding takes a little longer, but yes.
And what was the second part of what was the second number that was thrown out? What is that covering?
Well, there's actually three numbers. The 237,000, that was an estimated price I got from one meter installation vendor. There's two that I know that do these large capital projects for municipalities. I just spoke with him briefly. I gave him a number. I didn't write any of our own specifications, so this price could be higher, this 237 for the labor side. So we're going to go out for quotes once we get the approval, if that's given tonight, and
come back. So it'd be 502 plus 237, actually. And the 237 is covered in the budget, or that would also be part of the borrowing?
That would be part of the borrowing, but again, it's going out to bid, so that's a rough number. I don't know what that is until we get bids back.
So we're close to 750,000 in a loan, internal loan. All right, further discussion?
Just a question. Are we not capturing the correct amount on the water meters to charge people? Is that what's happening? Are we not getting?
Meaning the failure of them?
Is it because?
No, I mean, what normally meters fail, the older style meters fail in the residents' favor. So they will get tighter, meaning they'll record more accurately at place them. So that's good. The little cash registers will work better. It's the battery side that is failing. It's a device that sends a radio frequency out. It's powered by a AA 9-volt. I'm not sure what, but that's what powers the Asian side of it. So that's what's failing.
Further discussion? And as we go forward and look at this as part of our borrowing, what report do we get back to say that this will affect our bond rating or it won't affect our bond rating?
I would say that going forward with this as it being unusual, that I would report back to the GGF committee on what we actually need to do in terms of how much of an interfund loan to extend from the general fund to the water utility, and then report back on a periodic basis on progress towards paying that loan back. I don't believe that this will affect the bond rating. If you do look, and one thing I noticed going through the rating document that we were given tonight is for exactly the reason that some municipalities could potentially use interfund loans to try to cover deficiencies in one area or another. When Moody's reviewed our finances, they looked at the total reserves across all funds and evaluated us based on that. So I could even just kind of as a point of interest, point that out. If you look at their report on page 10, of the document that Ehlers handed out under liquidity. They talked about, we have $8 million in liquidity across all of the funds, which is 34% of our total operating revenues. So this doesn't change that number because they're looking at it across all of the major funds. And I think they would continue to do that going forward. So, but having said all that, it is really important that we follow up on this and not allow it to lapse. So I will follow up with the GGF committee on a regular basis to keep them informed on the status.
And part of the urgency is because of increases in costs that are coming or will come?
It's the failure rate of the meters that we want to capture. We are already, I guess, history here, I started in 2017, we were at about a 200 per year failure rate. This last quarter, we were at 700 that we are manually entering into the billing system. It's very cumbersome for our billing staff, and like Administrator Kreckl said, the inundation of email, phone calls is kind of a tidal wave for our staff. And then I also want to just ask one question to Steve. What is the rate that we might be charged the utility if we do an in-fund loan? And I'm not saying before this motion is made, but maybe to consider.
We can cut such a deal.
There might be a possible funding source with a better rate that is not through an interview.
I think it's unlikely we could get a better rate. It'll probably be 1% to 2%. It'll be somewhere between the cost of what we borrow money for and the cost of what we're earning on our investments, which is pretty minimal. So.
Thank you.
So we're gonna buy 2,900 meters, and with the other group that will help install, you're gonna install 2,900 meters in a year?
It'll be done in, I was told by one vendor installer, about 8 weeks. Come in with a crew. They come in with a crew of 6 to 8 staff. They manage all the meter appointments. There is some interfacing with our water utility staff. Valves break, can't shut the water off, accessibility, those things. So.
Further discussion? Further discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Trustee Rick Miller.
Aye.
Trustee Kaminsky.
Aye.
Trustee Baum.
Aye.
Trustee Hudson.
Aye.
Trustee Jan Miller.
Aye.
Trustee Myers.
Aye.
Trustee Nyrider.
No.
Trustee Pieper.
Aye.
President Walter.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Next item under new business is item I, update on water rate increase application. Give us some more information on this new business item. I'll turn the meeting over to our village administrator, Steve Kreckl.
Right. I have a brief PowerPoint with some background information on the history of the rate increase, as well as the current status and next steps. Especially for the new trustees, as well as folks from the public who may be listening in. It's been a long time since we have had an increase in our water rates charged to our village water users. The last time there was a PSC approval was in 2010. I believe there was a small increase in 2014. I don't believe that was a PSC approved increase. We are allowed on occasion to have small 2 to 3% rate increases without PSC approval. The application was authorized by the village board in the summer of 2019 and was filed with the PSC in July of 2019. However, that initial rate application was rejected by the PSC because in the interim, and we were also expanding the infrastructure out to the Holy Hill area, and the PSC did not want to review a rate application at the same time that they were looking at the expansion of the water infrastructure out to that area. So they rejected us and asked us to resubmit in the spring of 2020, which we did. The village board also, as just a process note here, the village board does have a utility advisory committee. The utility advisory committee met in July of 2020 and reviewed the application for informational purposes and is standing by if the village board would like to refer any of the issues or analysis to them as well. The PSC issued a notice of proceeding in November of 2020, which means that's when they kind of got around to actually reviewing the application, looking at information, and beginning their decision-making process. We have been providing information, responding to questions, giving them data as requested over the past 6 months. And a few weeks ago in May, we were informed by the PSC that they completed the first step in their review, which is referred to as the revenue requirement analysis. So basically, over the past 6 months, they have looked at all of the financial records. They've looked at all of the records of all of the infrastructure, all of the equipment, everything that the water department is responsible for owning and maintaining. They've looked at what our expenses have been for the past 10 years and how we've been maintaining and operating those. They've taken that information, the PSC engineers and accountants and other analysts have reviewed it, and basically they have developed some initial findings that they've transmitted to us. And well, I'm responsible for going through the slides. All right, never mind. There we go. All right, I'm being asked to talk and advance the slides at the same time. I'm not sure I'm up to the task.
You're not chewing gum.
I'll do my best. I'll do my best. So that was the timeline, but I'll move on here to the revenue requirement findings. The PSC determined that our water utility requires an additional $1,154,000 annually in revenue for operations to adequately maintain infrastructure. To put that in perspective, our revenues from last year were approximately $2.3 million. So it's a significant increase, a 48.9% increase in rates. So to demonstrate what that means, for the typical residential water user, currently the typical water bill is somewhere in the range of $30 to $60 per quarter, depending upon, in my case, how many teenagers you have and how long a showers they take. But generally it's in that ballpark. This rate increase would increase that bill to $45 to $90 per quarter, so a significant increase. And there will be more information on that coming forward to the village board as we continue down this process with the PSC. In addition to that, one of their findings, the PSC's finding, is that the village would be able to charge a public fire protection charge on the water bill, which was another question, another issue that was part of the application that was originally submitted in 2019 and then again in 2020. And I will talk further about that in some detail this evening. So there are two outstanding issues that we need to work on at this point. One is continuing discussions with a large industrial user. I briefed the village board on that issue several months ago and have agendized that as a closed session item for this evening. We have been in ongoing discussions with the PSC as well as this large industrial user on a potential voluntary agreement regarding rates and payments to the village water utility. In addition, the PSC staff indicated that they, in order to proceed, would like to know the village board's final position or official position on public fire protection fees. So that's going to be an issue that, again, there's another agenda item that I'll talk in more detail about tonight. So what will the next steps look like? We have these two outstanding issues that we need to resolve. When those are resolved, the PSC will then work on providing us with final approval of our rate increase application. At that point, the rate increase will come to the village board for action. The feedback that I've gotten from our consultant that we're working with on this issue, Baker Tilly, as well as from PSC staff, is that the timeline is such that we may be able to implement the rate increase by the end of 2021. And I also should note that in the application materials, there is an outstanding issue that will need to be addressed sometime in the next year or two, 2022 or 2023. And relating to the installation of additional infrastructure out in the Holy Hill area. The initial plan for that infrastructure was to have the water utility to pay half of the costs. And that is still an option that's open to the village board if you would like to continue to have the water utility pay that portion back. And in essence, that those costs are then recovered through the water bills, or there are other financing options that are available. So with that, I'll pause on that slide and see if there are any questions or any areas for clarification.
Board? No questions.
Bad news.
I have a question. So we're currently at 2.3 million in revenues through our water utility, and they're saying that we need, in addition to that, 1.154. So that breaks down based on the water users and those that are receiving bills to, you said $30 to $60 per quarter?
And I'll go back to that slide. The current bill is the typical water bill. I talked to, when I was putting this slide together, I talked with our utility billing clerk. I said, you see all of these coming through the system. What's the typical, not average, but the typical residential bill? And she said, most residents in Germantown are paying between $30 to $60 per quarter.
So this increase would then move it to 45 to 90.
Correct.
Okay, so either $15 or $30 quarterly, $60 to $120 a year increase, but that does not impact, which is the bigger part of the water bill, is the sewer portion.
The sewer portion of that's billed on the water bill is not affected in any way by these increases.
And you've said it a couple times, residents. What does this do for business?
This impacts businesses similarly. I won't say it's exactly equally, but businesses would see a similar increase in their bills.
But not, it would be significant in some cases.
It would be a significant increase, yes.
Okay. And the reason they're saying that this needs to be increased by this much is because of a lack of initiative to actively increase the rates through, when was the last one, 2014 till now, 7 years?
Yeah.
Or call it 2010, 11 years.
I mean, first of all, I would say this is something that many municipalities are experiencing now as infrastructure ages and needs to be replaced. The requirements, the financial requirements for that infrastructure replacement is growing. The PSC sees regular requests for rate increases from many communities. When this moves forward, Baker Tilly will update. If you recall, when we started this process, they gave an analysis that showed where the village of Germantown was as far as water rates compared to other municipalities in the area and the averages in the state. And we were very near the bottom in terms of what water costs are within the village. This will move us up, but my initial reaction without having a lot of data is that we will not be at the top. We'll still be pretty competitive with what our water rates are. And again, the PSC is looking at that in terms of, for a water utility with the amount of infrastructure that we have to maintain, the amount of equipment that we have to maintain, what are the financial resources that are needed to do that? And that's where they're coming up with this additional $1,154,000 per year.
Okay. So when you say 48.9% increase, that of course makes everybody go, oh, it's huge. When you break it down to dollars, any increases, of course, has impact on households and whatever they're budgeting for their bills. But we're really talking about anywhere from $60 to $120 more per year for your water.
Right. And just to clarify and maybe help with the 48.9% and the 30 to 60 dollars, that's not the entire water bill. That's only the water portion of the water bill. There are other, there's the sewer portion, there's the not the MMSD charges, but there are other charges on the bills in addition to the water component.
And you mentioned that part of this increase is because of how we've increased our infrastructure and the extensions of what we've brought up to Holy Hill Road and some of the other development that has happened in the area?
No, actually, this increase is not related to that.
Okay.
This is that will be another issue that the village will have to address in the future. And there will be a decision point of whether or not we need to or want to recover that money from the water utility, and if that has any impact on rates. This is entirely separate from any new development in the village. This is entirely related to existing infrastructure and the need to maintain it.
Okay, so in that frame, since it's not about this, but it has to be dealt with in the future, being that we've had on in front of this body the extension of water into Richfield, does that help us or hurt us in regards to infrastructure and covering those costs?
That the extension of water into Richfield would not have impacted this particular request.
Right, not this part, I get.
In the long run, it's like any business. The broader the customer base, the more customers that are being provided service. There is an element of overhead, and water as kind of a business entity is very infrastructure and overhead intensive. So the broader the customer base that you're able to spread those costs over, the lower the cost to any individual customer.
Trustee Kaminsky.
Does the PSC require us to take all of this rate increase at once, or do we have some leeway over maybe a year and a half, 2 years? How do they look at that?
The PSC does not require the village board to implement the entire rate increase. That's an area that I don't have a complete answer for you at this point as far as the flexibility and how and when the overall increase and what sort of time period is available to implement it.
I guess my second question would be, I know who the biggest water user is, but who would be the second, third, fourth biggest businesses that use water? And because this is going to be a substantial increase for anybody with many toilets and
Industry that uses heavy water.
I might defer to our water superintendent. I don't know the answer to that question off the top of my head. What are other businesses that are heavy water users?
I would be curious as to what their bill is now and what it's going to.
And I would
Because,
like
mean,
to see the increase for
Yeah.
those types of places in regards to, we talked about residential. I'd like to see it on the business side as well. That it can kind of help us make our decision in regards to taking full recommendation or how we can break it up. If that would be the decision of the board.
This is just for information only tonight?
That's correct.
Okay.
Trustee Ball?
Not try to increase our water rates or something like that.
In 2014, we did.
I recall that we tried to get them raised because we knew this was coming. We weren't allowed to raise our rates.
You may be referring to the application that we submitted in 2019. We did submit an initial application. The PSC rejected it because they wanted more information on the impact of the expansion out in the Holy Hill area and whether that might reduce the need for the rate increase. So they required us to reapply in 2020.
Trustee Miller, Rick Miller?
Steve, if I recall, there was some discussion about larger water users getting a different rate than others. Are they saying this is across the board, or do we have leeway as to how this gets applied to the bills, business-wise, residential-wise, all that?
The PSC has to approve the rate structure, and there is some flexibility that we have there. The PSC is open to looking at some special rates because we have a unique circumstance with a large water user. And this impacts those discussions, and that's what I was going to talk about later on tonight.
Okay.
Trustee Jan Miller?
Question. When you went to the PSC, they were reviewing this and came back in November of 2020, is that correct? Or in this formula of 2.3 and fixing it, is that correct?
And actually, they started their review in November of 2020. They issued what they refer to as a notice of proceedings. And that's a way if, like, for example, if there are large water users or interested members of the public who want to follow the rate review and make sure that their interests are heard, that's what those notices are for. But that's when they began the review and really started looking for information from the village on all of the data related to our water utility.
And so were they aware that we need to make $750,000 investment in our water systems?
Yes, and we didn't discuss that issue in particular, but as an example, they asked for extensive data. They wanted the inventory of all of our meters, when they were replaced, and they did that for every asset that basically the water utility works. So that was a big part of Paul's life over the past 6 months, was pulling together all those reports and providing them to the PSC. And that's a good example of the type of why they're saying we need this increase.
Sure.
Further questions? We have more to come then. Next item under new business is item J, fire protection hydrant fees. Kirko.
All right, this is a related issue, also part of the water rate application, but a specific item. First of all, just kind of explain what a public fire protection fee is, and why we're talking about it tonight. The PSC requires utilities to charge the cost of installing and maintaining infrastructure for public fire protection, things like hydrants, separately than regular water bills. And as they're looking at that, the rationale is that there's benefits to having access to water for fire protection that goes outside of the actual use of water. If you live within so many feet of a fire hydrant, you probably pay less in property insurance than somebody who doesn't live anywhere near a fire hydrant. So municipalities do have choices for how these costs are recovered. And we right now, the Village of Germantown pays those costs to the water utility from the property taxes. So we collect property tax levy, and out of that, I think it was last year was about $537,000 that we budgeted in the fire department that was paid to the water utility for the cost related to maintaining hydrants and fire protection systems in the village. As the water rates increase and as the PSC recommends changes to the amount of revenue that we're bringing in, that also will affect the public fire protection fee. And the PSC is estimating that cost will go up to $600,000 upon implementation of the rate increase, and could potentially go up to $683,000 a year after that. So that amount is going to grow over the next couple of years. There's some, just wanted to talk about the rationale for the property tax versus the rationale for water bills. There's a mix, I don't know if it's half and half, but there are a lot of communities that choose both methods of recovering the funds related to public fire protection. I would say that traditionally, if you were to look at this, 30 years ago, Wisconsin has been a very property tax heavy state. That we generally tended to look to the property tax to recover expenses, and traditionally most communities paid those costs from their property taxes, and that helps to keep our water bills low. And one of the things I've heard in a lot of other communities and rationale back when this was done, property taxes were also income tax deductible. So, if you put it on my property tax bill, I can write that off of my income taxes. You can't do that with water bills. That's becoming less of an issue in recent years with changes in federal tax law. On the other hand, more and more municipalities have been transferring this cost to the water bills in recent years, partly due to levy limits and strain on property tax revenue. Some of the rationale is that properties in the water service area tend to benefit disproportionately from fire protection. Again, largely because of the issue of property insurance and the impact that living in an area that has access to water has on property insurance. Property tax exempt properties also pay if it's on the water bill. They don't pay if it's on the property tax bill. So that does have some positive effect for residential taxpayers. And it also does reduce the property tax levy or free levy funds for other services. And I guess maybe let's pause right there for a minute before I go to the next slide to see if there are any questions or that point.
Talk about the rural area.
Well, and that is, I guess, extending this, and I think that is a very good point. Under the property tax, rural areas are paying for the public fire protection fee, even though you could make the argument that they're not receiving as much of a benefit from that as properties that are within the water service area. So I think that feeds into the kind of that rationale.
Kaminsky.
Do we know, like, for example, what Menominee Falls does or Mequon?
I have that information. I don't have it handy. And it is something I can follow up. I'm going to ask that we look to take action at the next meeting, and I will have that available here. We did a review, and we did talk to several communities, and I don't remember which ones were which, but about half of the communities in the area are charging on the property tax, and roughly half are charging on the water bill.
Okay.
Which, Steve, under both rationales, which one is easier to collect if they don't pay their property tax bill or their water bill?
It really doesn't make a lot of difference from a collection perspective, because if people don't pay their water bills, we can put it on the property tax bill. So the difference in capability for collections is pretty minimal.
So,
Trustee Hudson.
sorry, if we were to make this change, we would see the water bills go up an additional approximately $600,000.
That's correct. This would be on top of the regular water bill increase.
So that would be a water bill increase of approximately 75%.
I haven't done the math, but that sounds about right.
Trustee Jan Miller.
If you added it to the water bill, they would be all listed individually, water, sewer, fire.
Correct. The communities that do that do list public fire protection as a separate line on the water bill, and it is listed independently.
It comes off.
That is a choice for the village board, and I will get to that in a couple of minutes. And maybe this would be a good time to transition to the next slide. I also want to point out it's not an either or. It's a continuum, and I've listed kind of three options here that the village board would have, and there are numerous options in between these as well. But one option on one end of the spectrum is that you could charge all public fire protection costs to the property tax, put everything on the property tax and none of it on the water bill. On the other end of the spectrum is you could charge the entire public fire protection costs on the water bill, put the entire $600,000 on the water bill, and let it be shown there. A third option, and there are many others in between, but a third option that I thought might be helpful for discussion is you could cap the property tax component at the current level, the $537,000, and put increases on the water bill. And you're not bound by that in the future. You are allowed to adjust that going forward if you want to shift it from one area to the other at some point in the future. It's not a permanent decision.
On our discretion or with PFC approval?
That is another good question that I don't have an answer to tonight. The initial review does require the PSC to take a look at it. If we modify it, I'm not sure. I don't know if the village attorney knows if that would require a second application to the PSC.
Not sure, to be honest.
That would also not be as in-depth or as lengthy or expensive as process as we're going through now for the overall rate increase, if it is required. Gave some examples here of what this would mean, both in terms of property taxes on households as well as water bills. These are meant to be illustrations based on averages. And it also does assume that these numbers assume that the village board, if the PFP was transferred to the water bill, that the property tax bill would be reduced by an equal amount. So under a $350,000 home, if 100% of that cost is billed to is put on the property tax, that home is paying about $76 in their property taxes that goes towards the PFP. If we would cap, and that's if we go up to the 600,000, if we cap that at $537,000, the additional property tax impact would be $7.77. I'm sorry, that would be the cost differential between the 537 and the 600,000 is $7.77, and then there would be nothing on the water bill. On the other hand, if the entire amount was shifted over to the water bill, then there'd be nothing on the property tax. If we shifted only the increase to the water bill, it would be $8.69. The water bill would go up on average $82.80 over the course of the year for the average household. And those were numbers that were calculated by PSC staff and provided to the village.
Trustee Myers?
All these questions that you weren't able to answer tonight because we're not going to vote on either one of these until the next meeting. You would have the answers by our next meeting when we vote on these?
Well, and what I was, if I could skip ahead and come back to a slide, what I'm asking the board for tonight is some feedback to prepare something that is going to be along the lines of what the board is interested in seeing, with a complete analysis and answers to some of the questions that I wasn't able to provide tonight. There is a significant amount of work in terms of resolutions, looking at the various financial impacts of the different alternatives. We can bring that back. We could bring that back to the Utility Advisory Commission. We could bring that to the Public Works Committee. There are some options for the process for the village board, and in order to kind of vet this and review it. So I think if I have a couple more thoughts to go through and then maybe come back to that question as far as what the village board would like to see and how you'd like to go about reviewing this. I did want to talk just a little bit more about the impact on the property tax levy and levy limits. If you reduced the amount of the levy by the amount of the current PFP, $537,000, that would reduce the property tax rate by 19 cents per thousand, and people would see a corresponding decrease in their property tax bills. The board is not required to reduce the levy by that amount. Levy limits for a number of different revenues require local governing bodies. If you increase one revenue, you have to decrease the property tax levy. This is not one of those cases. You are not required to decrease the levy. So if you chose to do that, you could, for example, and before I mention what I have on the screen, I'll also mention one of the obvious ones. Some communities have been using this to cover increased costs in fire protection. The Village of Germantown, the village board has added over $300,000 over the past couple of budgets to the fire department budget to try to convert part-time staff to full-time staff and convert to full paramedic service. There are some additional staffing concerns in the fire department that are out there yet. That's one option that some communities have looked at as a way of paying for the cost of additional fire protection. You're not limited to that. Another option that you would have available, as we talked about our debt issuance this evening, you could put that $500,000 a year into the road program, the paving program, and reduce the amount that we're borrowing by $500,000 per year. While that wouldn't reduce people's property taxes immediately, over time, it's maybe less of an issue if we're paying less than 1% interest. I don't know how long that will keep up, but you would be saving the property taxpayers not only the $537,000, but then also the interest that they would be paying on that as general obligation debt. And then the final point is, if you would shift this to the water bill, that does not affect the levy limit. If you increase property taxes to pay for the PFP, that is under the levy limit. So if we increase the amount that we're funding from the property tax bill, from the property tax revenues by $75,000 to pay the PFP, that is covered under the levy limit, and it means that there's less money available under the property tax levy for other services. So I've tried to frame this in terms of two potential feasible options for the village board to consider. One, under option A or recommendation A would be to shift the entire PFP to the water bill, apply those levy funds to the road program in the future, and reduce borrowing for the road program in the future. That would be a way of reducing the property tax levy to offset the increase in the water bill. A second option, recommendation B, which would have a less immediate impact on the water bill, would be to cap the property tax levy for the PFP at 2021 levels and charge additional PFP costs to the water bill going forward. So there'd be a small additional increase in the water bill, but it would preserve the property tax levy for other village services going forward. As far as process, we can move forward preparing resolutions, answering follow-up questions, providing additional analysis. The PSC is looking for a response from the village board or a decision from the village board on this issue before they move the rate case along further. However, there's not a specific deadline that you have to follow other than the financing needs of the water utility. I think if there is some initial feedback from the village board on which of these options you would like to see further fleshed out and brought back, that's something that I can work with other staff on and the village attorney on to bring back to either the Public Works Committee or the Utility Advisory Committee, or both.
Trustee Myers?
I just go back to what I was going to say. I know you want some ideas and so on and so forth, but this is some heavy stuff for a person like myself who's been around for a while. And if you were brand new, you're in a dark room. But needless to say, and if there is no time frame in regard to this, which I'm glad to hear, wherever they end up going, we need some of these, in my mind, we need to have some of these answers first that were put together, because that makes a difference to me, I believe, to make further suggestions to you.
So in regards to that comment, are you looking for information in regards to both of these recommendations, or are you leaning towards one over another?
Not even think in regard to the recommendations. I think I need to have answers in regard to the questions that were posed first.
Trustee Rick Miller.
I'm ready to make a recommendation. And it's not a dollar amount, but since I live outside the water utility, the obvious answer is to put it all on the water bill. No, I'm kidding. I mean, you got it, right? Yeah. Another one outside the water utility. No, I mean, we're talking about a significant increase already to the water bill. And I can't imagine that we're going to then put the additional full burden of this on top of that increase. So I would look at some type of split between the tax bill and the water utility, and probably the best recommendation is the one, cap it off at the tax levy and do the increase forward on the water utility. So that would be my recommendation.
And then basically start moving it in one direction or the other based off of any other input or information brought forward. I mean, in future years, you could transition.
Yeah, and I don't know.
more
I mean,
towards
it doesn't have to be exactly what the tax levy is at now, right? It can be a percentage on each. And I'm not sure what that balance is, but we can't put it all on the water bill. That's just going to be impossible.
And I agree with you in the sense of the increase in the water utility, as was discussed previously, was just to make the utility whole and be able to cover its infrastructure. To put this on top of that is quite the increase, as Trustee Hudson had mentioned. It's over 75 or about 75% increase to all water utility users. And while those that are not on the utility would probably appreciate that off of their tax bills, we have had it there since I've been on the board. And I think it's a good way to go forward in the transition, because it does allow us some room to move dollars to areas where we don't have to borrow for going, in future years as part of the levy increase that we're allowed. But then it also starts to to cover that, that cost overall. So you already have it locked in, and any increases then are then passed on to the water bill. And then that big giant hit that could happen if it was all there is not going to be realized. But, there's arguments on both sides, and some of those will be still paying both. Because those that are having properties that are in the water utility, they're covering both. So there's arguments on both sides, but I agree. I don't see it as a good way to go forward, is to place it all on the water utility at once, based on what we're discussing on our increase, just to make it whole, and to cover its infrastructure. So I'd be a recommendation B area. Trustee Baum.
I'd like to see a scenario where it's left on the property tax bill, and it's increased to fund some of the expenses that we have with the fire department, the $350,000 you mentioned earlier. I'd like to see that scenario. I've become comfortable with the way we're doing the roads program. I don't want to try and move water money in the roads program. Fire department bill that is supporting the fire department, I'll pay a little bit more on my property tax for that. I believe your number was $7.77 is going to a property tax bill. Round that up to $10 and give all that back to the fire department. I'd like to see a scenario about that.
Can do that.
Trustee Hudson.
Have the ability to phase in this change over a period. So for example, we chose to use the 40% and it's over. So incidents?
The short answer is yes. What I need to follow up on with more detail is, because it is common, and actually the PSC in the conversations that I had with them gave several different scenarios and options, because they saw this as well, that with a 48% increase, it's unlikely we're going to want to go forward with the entire amount. What I need to get additional information on is what that process looks like, and whether it's under the control of the village board, or if we have to reapply with the PSC each time we want to make a change on that. And that's something I can have for the next meeting.
See.
Other recommendations, comments, concerns? Knew this day was coming.
Yeah.
It's our own making, in some regards, not so much for the increase in transference, but the ability to make the water department whole. And all of us can sit on this board and say, well, I didn't start it, but you know what, now we're responsible to it. So we need to find a way to find a solution that works not only best for the utility, but also best for our residents. Kaminsky.
Moving forward, Steve, what would you recommend for us looking to the PSC for increases? What do most communities do? Is it every 5 years? Is it every 4 years, every 6 years?
I would say part of it depends on the needs of the community, and to what extent they have aging infrastructure. I would say that we would want to do a review no less than every 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
The other option that is available is that without PSC approval, we can each year implement a small increase of 2 or 3%. And again, I think a lot of communities do that to try to avoid the sticker shock of 48 or 49% increase.
The questions, comments? Everybody say comfortable, but is everybody okay with the information as presented tonight? And then we'll look for further information at the next meeting. You have what you need from us in regards to direction and
Yes.
a path? Okay.
And thank you. I know it was a lot of information, so appreciate that.
Okay, then we go on to the next item under new business. The next two items are actually closed session items, but we need to vote individually on each one. So we'll start with.
Mr.
new-
President.
Yes, sir.
I think we're actually on the next item. We're going to just start in open session. There's some stuff that doesn't really need to be in closed session
Okay.
on it. So I think we'll just start there. And then when we get to the point that we're ready for the closed session, we'll indicate that. And then we can do the votes on the next two items for
Okay.
that purpose.
Then our next item on the agenda is location and design of public works building. And if, when we so choose, we can go into a closed session for the purpose of deliberating or negotiating the purchases of public property, investing in public funds, or conducting other specified business, whatever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session, and then may reconvene in the open session to take such action as it deems appropriate, and that is per Wisconsin statutes 19.85 subsection 1 subparagraph E. So with that then, we'll get into the location and design of the public works building. And is Larry presenting that, or?
Actually, Grave.
Grave? Okay, then we have a gentleman from Grave.
Oh, sorry, I need to bring these up on my computer here, so.
Good evening. I don't know what you're going to show on the screen first.
I'm pulling that up here. It'll take me just a minute.
Swung out that.
Okay. I just have to get my computer connected to the screen here. It'll take me a minute.
But I unplugged.
Steve's pulling up the floor plan. I kind of like to go back to start this meeting. All done a late W based on the information they were given. Building ended up being 175,000 square plus or minus. There was a concern about its cost. So became involved and looked at the plan, thought that there was some efficiencies that we could reduce the building size. Small of the building itself should lower some of the costs. What we did is we took all the information that was given to us as far as equipment and we sized it out. So we ended up with a square footage of what all the equipment took for its actual footprint, and then worked on the administration, the shops, all the other areas that were really outside storing equipment, but came up with a square footage with that. Met with the staff to refine those numbers a little bit so we had an understanding of what their needs were. And we added up the square footage of the vehicles, square footage of the administrative areas. That gave us actual footprints, but didn't give us circulation, which added a sizable amount of square footage. So to the administrative areas, we took the square footage and we added on 25% circulation between offices and toilets, etc. So the vehicles, you need a lot more square footage because you've got aisles coming in, the parking stalls, space between vehicles. And that's approximately 10%. So if you had a 10,000 square feet of equipment, you might need another 25,000 square feet just access to get that equipment parking. So after we came up with those numbers, which was the actual equipment, the administrative areas, access to the administrative areas, and access to the equipment, we came up with a building of approximately 140,000 square feet. Now, that's kind of, it's a starting point, but it's not based on design. It's based on some formulas to get us to a starting point. We're starting out at 175. So at 140,000 square feet, there's a potential 35,000 square savings. So when we met last time, took just that block of 100,000 square feet, subtracted buildings 4 and buildings 5, which are existing, and said, maybe we can reuse those buildings and save some of the square footage out of the new building, which then ended up with a building of about 1,000 square. But when I placed the 175,000 square building that was previously done on the site, it wouldn't fit. It was just too big for the site, and that's looking at both the DPW site and baseball field size. So we looked at 130,000 square feet, and it's really tight on the Little League field. You could just make it. But again, these are just rough estimates. So after that meeting, I listened to what you say, decided, well, what would be the most efficient size building we can fit on the site, where it occurs on the site, and keep it as small as it can, all the needs that all the departments. And that's the floor plan that you see there. It accommodates all the vehicles, all the projection of additional vehicles and equipment for the next minimum 10 years. It also discounted buildings 4 and 5 and said, let's put it all under one roof. Let's not reuse buildings 4 and 5 if we do with a building size. So really what was driving the original building layout wasn't necessarily how does it fit on the site, what's the most efficient building size we can get, and as I was coming towards the end of that building size, how do we tweak fit the site? And so it was all done up with a building of about 120,000 square feet. And it's what this could be called schematic phase, but it's not really schematic phase because we haven't gone into that kind of detail, but it accommodates all the needs they were looking for, all the administrative spaces, all their vehicle storage, and is tweaked in such a way that it could fit the site, which we'll see when we hit the site plan. So see, this is floor plan option 3. We had first option, and we met with the staff and revised it, which was 2, and most of it was driven by mechanics needs. So that again, which option 3, the spaces that were provided, looked at by all the department heads, and everybody was comfortable with what the building layout was. What we need to do is we're going to tweak when we get into the shop areas and some of the administration. Right now it's out, but discussions will find better relationships than even if we didn't change anything, it's on this plan workable. So what you end up seeing is on the bottom of the plan is basically all the large single vehicles, trailers, everything that would be a larger size than some of their smaller equipment. In the middle of the bay is all the plow trucks, which is their current plow trucks plus their future plow trucks. 5 pickup, trailer, gardening or lawnmower setups that the parks would use that they would keep parked in there, that they wouldn't have to load and unload. And then the remainder of that is some additional equipment. And then above that is where all the pickup trucks are, and they're all color coded. I have a different plan that's up there, but each color represents a different department, so they could see that we were trying to keep their equipment that they'd use in proximity of each other and it wasn't spread through. And then the very top row is all the administrative areas and the work areas. And then the wing that comes out that goes straight up is the mechanics bay, which has bays in there for the fire truck, large plow trucks, 5 lift bays, 5 regular driving bays. Several of those bays are to the inside of the building so they can move equipment in there to service it in the winter side. So we came up with the floor plan, and it all began to fit on the site, but the exact configuration of how it was laid out wasn't site driven, it was efficiency driven. So then we took a look at the floor plan versus the site.
If I could real quickly just interject one point that Wayne mentioned but I think is really important to emphasize, is that when you look at the diagram that's up on the screen and the next ones that we'll be showing, he met with each one of the superintendents and said, okay, for the foreseeable future, for the next 10 to 20 years, as the village grows, what do you see being added for equipment that you're going to need space for? And as an example, and I believe it was 4 additional plow trucks. So as you look at the bigger pieces of equipment, those red rectangles, those are our plow trucks, and there's 4 in there that we don't own right now. There's 4 additional that if we continue to grow and add roads that need to be plowed, there's room for that capacity, and that was done for both highways, parks, sewer and water. So I know that was one of the concerns of the village board. You wanted to be sure that that we incorporated room for growth, and what you're seeing in front of you does.
And it wasn't just the plow trucks, it was also pickup trucks and trailers and other major piece of equipment that they figured they would be purchasing in the near future. So that scheme of 126,000 square feet does not use buildings 4, 5. Everything is under 1 row. That becomes sort of important because last time of the grade change that's over by the DPW and parking lot that goes into area is it drops down 8 or 10 feet. So if you run the building north south, exit the building, exit into a wall of dirt that's 8 feet tall. So taking out building 5 became important because we could then cut the grades, exit the building at approximately the grade of the streets, and then slightly ramp up into the existing DPW area because they need that area for all their outdoor storage, their fuel area, storage of stone and is in the triangle. We also had to take a look at capturing the water runoff, which is the pond corner. The thought is we wanted to keep ball building, which in the mechanics area needs 30 feet clear to be able to get their equipment in. Bring a lift in is going to be rather tall, so we didn't want it right up against the intersection, but we wanted a tall building back a ways so it wasn't overpowering the intersection. We wanted to turn the retention pond into a more landscaped area so it's actually an accent to the building instead of just an area to dump water. And based on what the floor plan was, all the offices are on the west side facing the pond. There's a drive that has to go around the perimeter of the building for fire department access and unlimited floor area. And the bays for service are the wing that's way on the north end of the building and extends towards the west. Took the parking, and there's minimal parking in the front, and most of the parking is on the east side of the building, screened out by the building. And As far as expansion, we can take the end wall on the north end. We end up using precast, we can make it a removable wall, so we move the wall and expand the building if sometime in the future area that we have isn't enough and you need to expand, so there is some area for expansion. Based on all the areas that they needed for outdoor storage, it really takes up the existing DPW site. The thing that would have to remain would be the cell tower. To build a retaining cell tower because the grades coming out of the building, there's going to be some grading in there, but it's really minimal when you take a look at the site as a whole. So the question that was before was, well, why are we keeping the old buildings? We don't have to if you don't want to. Keep building 4. Really think you need to get rid of building 5 because of it as an access drive. You could keep all 5 buildings in operation during construction, so it would not impact the operations of the DPW. And when the DPW is done, then you tear the buildings down, or however you figure the existing DPW site. So the other thought was if we had, let's say, a more efficient floor plan, it's not designed specifically for the site, like out to the lake, but it fit efficiently on the site. This also gives a starting point for other properties. If it's not located here, this building could fit on other properties as long as basically it's needed now. Question?
Mr. Myers?
How many acres would this encompass?
Chairman, you recall?
Thank you.
So if the question that was left last time is, well, we fit the building on the site, yeah, we can. Said it's a starting point. If this is the goal, well, we still have to now go through a true schematic design to work out all the spaces, make sure it fits the needs, but it is a workable plan, and it's not crowded. Have space around the brick, so we're not right up against.
I have a question.
Trustee Kaminsky.
I heard that this would be good for about 10 years, or will it be good for 20 years? I've heard both estimates now.
Well, I think it would be good for, in my opinion, a lot longer than 10 or 20 years. The question that was asked, and I think the farthest out that it's fair to kind of ask the superintendents to see what their equipment needs might be and how much the village might grow and try to accurately project that is 20 years. The question that was asked is, between 10 and 20 years, what pieces of equipment do you think you might need to add? And that was reflected on those diagrams. That would, if you think about the 2050 planning process and what that looks like, that would take us to a point 20 years from now where the village is by and large built out to that line kind of that goes diagonally across the village to the rural preservation area. And I think if the village grew and that section started to become more densely populated with more roads, then the public works equipment needs would go up. But otherwise, I think this would get us what we need.
Okay, at this size. We're not just trying to get wedging on that property. Okay.
Yeah, this is not, and I know that's an important concern. I want to make sure, and as I'm looking at the other public works folks, I think we've tried to make a point of emphasis that we don't want to try to squeeze in. We want to try to make sure that we're addressing all the needs and concerns, and I see heads nodding. That really is the approach that we tried to take. We're not taking any shortcuts here or trying to short any space needs.
How old is our original building? It's about 50 years old, isn't it?
The 70s.
53 it was built?
Oh my gosh. There you go. So it's got to last that long, guys. That's how fast we work.
They're not going to be there. Go ahead.
Trustee Hudson?
That's exactly what my concern is. So building for the next 10 or 20 years. I heard you use the word expandable. You don't own the expandable to. So can't expand to this land. Concerned that it's building faster than we, with how this plot of land is right now, facing exactly where we 5 years into the future. But my concern is this plot of land.
To respond to that, when I say expandable, I don't necessarily mean expanding into that property that's just outside your property to the east. But you could probably expand 50 or 75 feet. Take a look at the floor plan and see how many vehicles you can get in 50 or 75 feet. You've got 4 lanes that you can, so if you pick up 2 or 3 vehicles per lane, that could be an additional 12.
I see that. I see that I heard you use the word efficiency several times. Another one of my concerns is vehicles are going to have to be precisely to use maximum efficiency. Wasted space here.
The vehicles, the major vehicles, the pickup house, appearance, which is pretty substantial. The drive lanes should be really tight to make a turn. All the drive lanes in there are all, so you have more than enough width in able. If you up another couple vehicles by the quantity of vehicles you had, if you take 6 inches out of that 4 feet, 6 inches, have enough space left over to add another vehicle without extending the building length.
If everybody should have a single vehicle.
Well, we did talk about that, and it's one thing for show it on paper and then, okay, so suggestion would be is using this as a guide, is that they park the vehicles, it's the way they're shown or adjust it. And then after they're in there, stripe it based on the vehicles and standard widths. That was some efficiencies that we picked up from the other plan, is that they put all vehicle stall widths at 10, 12 feet. Well, you had vehicles that were a lot narrower, and you had some stall widths that were sticking a 12-foot vehicle in there. So yeah, to be efficient is that you want to lay the vehicles out, and after it's all laid out and it's comfortable, then stripe it. The vehicles might have to make some switches down the line if you pick up a bigger vehicle and you switch it around. There is more than ample width for access and more than 4 feet. And the equipment, the smaller stuff, still has 3 feet between vehicles. Might be efficient, but I don't think it's crowded.
Trustee Baum?
Southwest corner of the lot, the lowest point, or is the entire south along Freistead Road low point? I moved the pond to the east side of the site.
To the east side, it basically mirror the pond in there.
Yes, and if you mirror the building, then your 2 drive lanes could actually be extended up into the triangular area, thus giving you actually ability to expand the building. Right now, the limitation is we don't own the property, that house next to us. But if you flip the building over, you still have the ability to extend the building.
Answer to your question is yes, if you wanted to mirror the building till we get our grading plan back and survey, can't tell you for sure, but from what you see, it's relatively flat. Then the goal was to get the large building away from being right along the street by pushing it to the east side, where it's along the
And
street.
that's a point that whoever's guiding this is going to have to work with you on. Is it more important to have the flexibility of expanding this building in the future, or is it more important to have the building off the road? That's a discussion point that will need to go forward. Is there anything that you can stack on top of office space, go above storage space? You got what looks to be a mezzanine in there. I see a couple of staircases. What's on the mezzanine?
There's 2 mezzanines. There's a mezzanine for the annex area where there are heavier equipment on that mezzanine. Also have a crane in there for pulling out engines and large equipment. So the mezzanine would be at a point where they could pull it off or pull it out of the equipment, slide it over and store it on the mezzanine. So it's
Okay.
more the mechanics mezzanine. Then the other mezzanine, which is above the administrative area, one goal would be to try and move all the mechanical service equipment inside and put it on the mezzanine. Get it off the roof. It's easier to service. It lasts longer. So water heaters, mechanical units, air compressors, that would go on the mezzanine. Space that's left over that needed for the mezzanine was allocated, and there's more than enough space for outside the mechanical units and their designated area for additional storage. But the mezzanine is easy enough as long as it's for storage, is we could extend it to the south if we needed to. Its stopping point, considered somewhat arbitrary. The only thing that can be affected is the second stairway to the mezzanine shift, but that can be worked out when we work out the administrative offices below.
Right now, I can't read, even if I blow it up, I can't read the uses of these office spaces, but there's very little office space. It seems like it says mostly storage and parking and storage, and see a whole lot of offices on this floor plan, is correct?
All the offices are on the outside wall. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's a conference room to the inside of the offices.
Yep.
It was thought that I'd sooner have an office with an outside window and move the conference room in and vice versa. Yes, and we do have workspaces and buying storage, which is on the inside. But the other big areas that they needed was the break room and a training room, which is off the main corridor coming in right on the other side of the offices, and the men's locker room and women's locker room. And then just about everything else is service areas. So by moving any administrative areas to a mezzanine now makes it required to be accessible. And if we keep storage up there, we don't need an elevator and we can save that expense.
Right, and give me a ballpark value from your past experience. The last couple of buildings you did, what was their cost per square foot?
We have Mike Moore here from Moore Construction, and he can answer that better than I can.
All right, I'll stop there for now.
So I had a question.
Trustee Jan Miller?
Thank you. There on this photo, you, oh, there it is. The existing buildings right now have a big X through them. Obviously, they're going to be taken down.
Yes.
But there's a road, and then there's perimeter bins randomly. But if you build a new building and the old buildings come down, what is that space? What can we utilize that space for?
Yep.
Okay, so here are the 5 buildings.
Correct.
And in reference to those 5 buildings, these 2 buildings are in relatively good shape. The other 3 buildings really aren't.
Right.
Okay. The thought is that if you wanted to, you could potentially leave building 4. Would prefer to take out building 5 because here's your exits or entrances coming in the new building. You come up where building 5 was, take this path out and go through the existing tree to up in here is where we have the store bins, the fueling facility. They got spoils bins. Everything plus what's not shown up there is there's some trailers that need to be parked out there that don't fit in here. Some miscellaneous other small equipment that would be up. So this whole space would be utilized. None of it's wasted. The drawbacks to the site, first off, the funky configuration, because we get this notch right in the side, which doesn't help us. Get the change of grade in here of about 10 feet. And right here, we've got the cell tower that can't go. So this will not fit there. This does fit here. All the parking, or most of the parking, is screening out of the side. There's circulation around the building, so you could circulate through here or come up here to get access to their outdoor storage. So
Anywhere. That'll make it efficient. How about, how many acres is that, what we're on right now? Right, okay.
Our recycling center here?
That's what I was wondering. Or build this at the recycling center.
We, and I can maybe start that answer. It's something we've talked about a lot internally. It's possible. The question that we're still reviewing is the space that's necessary for the composting of the yard waste. And it would, It would, the answer would definitely be yes, yes, if at some point there are many parcels adjacent to this property that could serve that purpose once the yard waste is dropped off and goes through the tub grinder, it's allowed to compost for a period of time. If we were able to acquire one of the adjacent properties for that purpose, the answer would definitely be yes. Without acquiring property, it would probably be a very tight squeeze, and I don't think that we can answer for certain that the answer that we would be able to move the recycling operations here. So that is something that's still it's a good question and somewhat an open question.
We mirrored the building. Wouldn't you really then lose building 4 instead of building 5? Based on the paths out? And then with that, I tend to believe, like Trustee Baum had said, I tend to believe that that southeast corner is probably the lowest point just based on the wetland and the river proximity to this property. I would think it would drain that way, and that's just a guess. But it makes sense to me based on where the water basin is. But I would rather hold on to the bigger building than the smaller one.
My thought would be that this new building is going to be good for 30 years. And 30 years, building 4 is going to be a piece of crap. Then you'll want to tear it down. At that point, when you tear that building down, you could expand main building into where building 4 is. Not knowing the grade situation, the 10-foot that you talked about. That's the way I would look at it. Building 4 is sacrificial. It's sometime in the future that.
What about the baseball fields?
I've been watching the baseball field since we started talking about this.
Yeah, so I thought we weren't, what are we gonna do about the baseball fields? Where are we gonna put those?
How about we start using them all day long? I drove by this weekend and the last few weekends, they're not using the app. All empty, all
I do
afternoon.
not want to take off the baseball ads in a little.
There's other discussions of alternative fields or possible alternative use. Plus, if we get into the closed session, there is other discussions in alternative sites. So basically, what you're seeing here is we proposed to them to make the building fit on this property. I guess our question was, can this building fit on this property? And the result of that is yes, it can, based on what we see here. If you're willing to go in this direction, this building with what you want in the building and for growth potential for 20 up to, I haven't heard 30 years, but up 20 plus years, this will work as long as you're in this type of a situation. Again, it's like you said, it's estimates. It hasn't been drawn out completely. But based on their experience, they feel that this would be the best way to make this building work on this property, rather than the angles that we saw earlier or the different shaped buildings. As we discussed before, no one is looking to kick out the Little League and not give them something to go to. I don't think anybody on this board, and I'm not going to speak for everybody, but my own personal opinion would be I would not take a field away without having another field to replace it with, period. And the baseball families, or the group that we talked to at the Park and Rec, were very willing to explore opportunities for not only a new facility, but ways to fund that. And they were very proactive in wanting to get involved in that and show how that they could build some of this for themselves through that action. So I'm willing to look at all of that. And I think some of as we go forward and look at maybe the next step or the next part of this presentation, some of those things may become clearer for us, or this site may become clearer for us. But we look at it all and then we make our recommendations based on that information. Trustee Jammuller.
Final question. What is the timeline to build something?
The favorable back. Go into spring, busier contractor. It's competitive. Say that he could still get the building done, start moving up. If it's discussed for several months, then it becomes more and more difficult for us to resolve. It just means that if you get it out for next year, it won't be out in January, February.
These concrete walls.
And there's a real problem now with cast and steel bar joists, precast being the concrete walls. Amazon is popping up their and they're sucking them dry. They're developing long.
This is going up. Thank you.
The questions in regards to what we've seen here? Do we know if the, in a refueling area, if it's part of the price, and I'm sure we don't have it, but we'd be replacing the tanks? Or would they be above ground?
He's got that in his cost breakout if you want.
So it would replace entirely what's there now? You know how old those tanks are? When did they switch all the gas stations over? Are they before that or after that? That's good, I like that. Any other questions? Questions? Appreciate the presentation and also all the hard work you did to get us this far. Do we consider the next phase of this, which would then be the motion to go into closed session? Okay, then we have requirement for a motion to go into closed session to get to the second part of item K, and then also we have another new business item L that also is closed session. So I'd entertain a motion to go into closed session for item K.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion?
Who needs to be here?
I would request the village staff that's in the room and the Grave Consulting staff.
Okay. Indiana?
Yeah.
Tried to get you out.
That means I'm out.
No. I meant I cast a broad net when I say village staff, the village people.
All right, roll call vote, please.
Trustee Myers.
Aye.
Trustee Pieper. Aye. Trustee Baum.
Aye.
Trustee Hudson.
Aye.
Trustee Kaminsky. Trustee Rick Miller.
Aye.
Trustee Jan Miller.
Aye.
Trustee Nightrider.
Aye.
President Walter.
Aye. And then,
Motion.
10 minutes, please.
wait, and then we need a motion to go into closed session for new business item L, which is potential water service agreement with large water user. The village board may enter into closed session per Wisconsin statutes 19.85 subsection 1 subparagraph E for the purpose of deliberating or negotiating the purchasing of public properties, investing in public funds, or conducting other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session, and then may convene into or reconvene into open session to take such action as it deems appropriate.
Motion to session.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion? Discussion, roll call vote, please.
Trustee Myers.
Aye.
Trustee Pieper.
Aye.
Trustee Baum.
Aye.
Trustee Hudson. Trustee Kaminsky. Trustee Jan Miller.
Aye.
Trustee Rick Miller.
Aye.
Trustee Nightrider.
Aye.
President Walter.
Aye. If we do go back into open session, it will be open to the public, but it will not be televised. The next regular village board meeting will be on Monday, June 21st at 7 PM here at the Village Hall Boardroom. Thank you all for coming tonight. Thank you all for watching, and have a good night. 5 minutes or 2 minutes, 2 minutes until we go into closed session to allow everybody to button up, walk out, and dress. I can just hit this, right?